Education meeting to order at 7 o'clock. This evening, we have the privilege of having our board members from our Lee Elementary Student Council here with us this evening. So if they could please come up, I'd like to introduce them. We have with us this evening Ella Hill, so they know, Jake Morgan, Olivia Schomer, and Sarah Yelenich. Thank you guys for coming, and they will lead us. If we could all please rise for the pledge. Whenever you guys are ready, we're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent, thank you. Great job, guys, thank you. Next, we'll have roll call. Dan?
Bridget?
Here.
Margaret?
Here.
Rob?
Here.
Tracy?
Here.
Dan? Here. Andrew?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next is approval of the agenda. We have an addition under number 10. We have item E, auditorium lights. So I would need a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Support?
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, our True Blue Moments. We'll start with the elementary. Mr. Berkmeyer?
Good evening. I have a couple of things I'd like to present to you to keep you informed of what's happening at Will Lee Elementary. First of all, I'd like to announce that eSpark is up and running. This will be our first week where students are going through a lot of the orientation, and through next week they'll go through that orientation and then they'll be starting their individual quests. During our PLC, the teachers had an opportunity to dig deeper into the student data, so they had an opportunity to look at all that NWEA data and find out how it's going to be most useful to them in the classroom to assign groups and work with individual students. Third grade will be taking their field trip to the Henry Ford Museum next Thursday. We also had an awesome turnout with our parent-teacher conferences with a building average of 97%. And lastly, and most importantly, I'd like us to offer a sincere thank you to Atlas Physical Therapy and the Majewski family. They have decided to become sponsors of our technology lab again, sponsoring $500 this year, which brings their 3-year total to $1,500.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you. The middle school, Mr. Bartels.
Thank you. The highlights for Richmond Middle School over the last month and some things that we're moving forward to. Parent-teacher conferences have come and gone. However, we highly encourage all parents at any time throughout the year to conference with their child's teacher should they feel the need. PTA Book Fair went really well during the parent-teacher conferences. On November 11th, we celebrated our 6th annual Veterans Ceremony. It was a great event. You can see it on Richmond TV, and the Richmond Voice also ran an article on the Veterans Ceremony. The 7th grade through 12th grade choir Veterans Tribute Concert last week was excellent. Richmond TV taped that as well. I'm not sure when that one will be on, if it isn't already. That was an excellent concert, and it was a full house to thank our veterans and active military. We too had 3.5 hours of excellent staff development last week. We focused on what we teach and how we teach. Tomorrow morning is our 2nd annual, it's our Morning with Dads Male Mentor outreach. This year we themed it Movember with Mentors. The National Junior Honor Society and the PTA do a great job supporting the event. Our 8th graders in December will be going on their annual Holocaust Museum field trip. It goes along with their reading of The Devil's Arithmetic. Builders Club have been making scarves. They plan to deliver them and Christmas Carol at Meadow Lodge in December. Student Council had a 5th and 6th grade pumpkin painting event, and they also hosted a 7th and 8th grade dance. In December, they'll be doing their annual food drive in conjunction with the Lions Club, Richmond Lions Club. The entire K-12 art department will be hosting an art show to show off some of their artwork during the holiday concerts. The band concert is on the 9th and 10th of December at 7:30. The choir concert is on the 16th and 17th of December at 7:30, and that's for both the high school and middle school choirs and bands. National Junior Honor Society did their first annual Rake and Run community service project where they raked 38 yards in Richmond. It was just an act of kindness to the families in Richmond community schools. They collected 155 pounds of candy, which was also featured in The Voice, and which was able to purchase 2 uniforms for children to go to school in Africa, and it's part of their global outreach. Future events include working with Make-A-Wish and collecting socks for families in need. Newspaper full edition for November has already come out, and they're coming out with a special holiday edition in December. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Michon, the high school.
Good evening. We had quite a bit going on last month. We have our McRel team, which is our high school. McRel team is back in the classrooms. We have 5 teachers trained in classroom observation, and they are visiting each classroom in our building every 2 weeks. They are documenting the teaching methods being used and the depth of knowledge going on in our classrooms. The data collected will be shared with the staff both in January and in May, and our goal is to increase the depth of knowledge in our daily teaching. On November 13th, Mr. Brown had the Central Macomb Community Credit Union in to bring Mad City Money simulation on real-world budgeting to our students. Over 100 11th and 12th graders were given a folder with a new identity, complete with an occupation, salary, spouse, student loan debt, credit card debt, and medical insurance payments. The students visited 10 stations to purchasing housing, transportation, food, clothing, household necessities, daycare, and other needs. During the simulations, some students were greeted by what is known as the fickle finger of fate, with either good news when they received a windfall or bad news when they received an expense. The Richmond students were well prepared and were conservative in their decision making. We want to thank Mr. Brown for providing this opportunity for our students. On November 13th, we had our first annual MME Academy Awards. We brought out the red carpet and the spotlight to acknowledge those seniors who passed the MME test last year. We shared with both the juniors and the seniors our test results and challenged our juniors to do better this year. Out of the 153 students tested, we had 21 pass the math section, 27 pass the science section, 75 passed the social studies section, 90 passed the writing section, and 101 passed the reading section. Overall, we had 14 students proficient in all 5 categories. On November 13th, Paul Costanza from the Times-Herald talked with our newspaper class about careers in journalism. Thank you, Mr. Murphy, for providing our students with this opportunity. We too held parent-teacher conferences. I cannot brag about our percentage, but we did have 47% of our students attend our conferences. 12 staff members have volunteered to attend training in January in positive behavior support. This program deals with the behavior concerns of our students in our multi-tiered support system. The goal for the high school will be to have a program in place for the 2015-16 school year. On November 14th, Richmond hosted the Career Technical Education County Directors. Our guest speaker was Ralph Hansen from Lansing AIS. He presented the current course at AIS with an attempt to recruit other students to our program. He also explained that AIS is looking to open the AIS Technical Institute. They have applied for accreditation and plan to operate the school starting in January of 2016. They are looking at Richmond for a possible future site. This has come about because of the high demand for qualified operators and mechanics. And last but not least, today we had 2 state troopers in the building from the Michigan State Police. They presented the use of force training to our students in the criminal justice class. Our students learned and actually practiced how to take down combative people in several different situations. And I'd like to thank Mr. Margosian for providing our students with this opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Benoit, student activities and athletics.
Thank you very much. Once again, through the efforts of Dr. Mylart, we've received a grant from the United Dairy Institute of Michigan in the amount of $2,500. It's associated with chocolate milk, and you may see some creative posters or pictures that will be displayed throughout the building to promote that. And thank you, Dr. Mylart, for doing that. And as we get closer to the holiday seasons, our student-led government and other service clubs are very busy. Student government is devoting December 5th as an in-service day to look at their own mission and look at their own role in the high school and student government. They're bringing in some people from other communities to help them with that. There will be an administrator from Elmont, along with myself and Mrs. Michon. So they're getting very busy. Thank you to Mrs. Smallwood and Dr. Ladd for their efforts with our student government. National Honor Society is very busy under the direction of Mr. Rainier in their tutoring program and their bell ringing for the Rotary Club and the Salvation Army. If you see them in the community, I know I saw a couple of them at Kroger the other day. So I really appreciate them doing that. It's a very nice way to give back to the community. Under the leadership of Mr. Murphy, the Key Club is very busy, raised $345 for UNICEF, packaged over 1,000 meals through the Kids Against Hunger program, and their annual Giving Tree program begins this week. And also under the direction of Mr. Murphy, the Blue Devil Advocate, second edition came out last Thursday. Looks very nice. The students who work on that do an awesome job and take their role very seriously. I know I've met a couple of them, and they are very thorough. Mr. Bartels had mentioned the band and choir concerts coming up on the 9th and 10th and the 16th and 17th for the middle school and high school. Footnote there, the elementary concert will be on December 10th with third graders at 6:30 and the fourth graders at 7:30. Congratulations to the football team, Coach Coker, Coach Bishop, and all the coaches and players in their district championship. First district championship, I understand, since 2003. Very exciting season. Congratulations all around. The winter seasons have begun within the last couple weeks. Boys and girls basketball, bowling, competitive cheer, wrestling, all are underway and extremely busy right now preparing for their seasons. And that's all I have.
To conclude the athletic and student activities report, I would like to take a minute and acknowledge Dr. David Mylart for his years of service for Richmond Community Schools. He's dedicated himself to the students and staff of the district, and I appreciate what he's done, and I'd like to present him with a small token of our appreciation on behalf of myself and the Board of Education. Dr. Mylart.
Thank you. Next is our public comments. It's the portion of our meeting if someone would like to address the board. We ask you to come up to the podium, state your name, and if there's a question that you have, there is a card there that you can leave your name and phone number, and we will get back with you with an answer. Is there anyone who would like to address the board? No? Okay. Next is items of interest from members of the board. Is there anyone on the board who has anything?
Yeah, I've got, is this on? I guess it is. I just want to, I was going to do this last month and I missed my opportunity, but I want to just point out that thanks to the administrators and the staff for embracing the changes. There is a lot of changes going on, especially last month. There was changes that occurred that probably shocked some people, but everyone's embraced those changes. And the key is information and communications are key when we make these changes. All the decisions are based on facts and data to improve the learning environment here at RCS. So I just want to thank everyone that's been involved in those changes. There's going to be more. There's a lot of things that have happened since Mr. Walmsley's been here, but I think they've all been positive. So I just want to thank everyone for embracing those changes.
Yeah. Thanks. Anyone else?
I do have a few things. Just, I guess I want all of us, all board members and anyone who is here, to understand that in this time that we're in this interesting thing called the lame duck session with the legislatures in Lansing, it is kind of become standard that interesting legislation gets passed during this time that affects public education. And the last time this happened, it affected us in an extremely negative way, in lots of ways. And so I would ask for every board member and everyone here to pay attention to what's happening. Pay attention to what's out there, what's on the docket to be voted upon, because there's some scary stuff out there. And I'm not a person who feared mongers. That's not who I am. But I just think that we need to be aware and let our representatives know the effect that it will have to Richmond Community Schools and to Richmond's students. I just ask that we do that. And you know, I don't often make comments about things that I read or hear in social media. But in the last month, there were some things that were out there in social media land about this Board of Education that I feel that I just need to make a statement about. And the comment that was made referred to the fact that there are certain people on this board who don't have children, and that we don't make decisions in the best interest for children because we don't have children. I would be one of those people, for those of you that don't know me. And if you attend these meetings on a regular basis, you will hear, I hope you will hear, from many of us, from all of us, whether we do have children or we don't have children, that we are children-centered people, or else we wouldn't spend our time doing this. And you know, I spend my days with children. I'm an educator. It's what I do. So though I don't have children, I devote my life to helping better children's lives. So just feel that it's necessary to make that comment, and that being a qualified board member has a lot to do with a lot of other things.
And I'm going to speak to that as well. And I do not speak to things. I do not do Facebook. Those of you who have come to board meetings know that I am not a Facebook person. But things were said prior to this election about school board members, about casting votes for people to get on this Board of Education who have children, that people should be on the Board of Education who have children. And so I'm going to speak to the fact that qualifications to be a school board member are, according to Michigan compiled laws, an individual is eligible for election as a school board member if the individual is a citizen of the United States and is a qualified and registered elector of the school district by the filing deadline. That means that all 7 of us sitting here on this board meet those qualifications. And to say that someone has to sit on a board of education, they have to have children to be interested and to care about what happens to the children in the school district in which they live, from me personally, is insulting. Because you have no idea, those of you who spoke about that on Facebook, you have no idea why I don't have children. And to make a statement that I don't belong on this Board of Education because I don't have children is deeply, deeply insulting. I, as well as everyone else that sits on this board, spend hours, thousands of hours of our time volunteering our time for the children of this district and for the people that work in this district. And everything we do is geared towards the children in this district. Like us or don't like us, that's your prerogative. But we work very, very hard to make things right for the kids that go to school here. So just make sure when you are making your statements that you keep your statements not at a personal level. It's offensive. And just to make one last clarification for myself personally, while I do not have children of my own, my grandson graduated in June. My granddaughter is a sophomore. I have a niece and nephew at the elementary school. I have a great nephew and 5 great nieces who attend these schools. So I have a vested interest on a personal level. And I also have a vested interest because I have lived in this community since I was 8 years old. Thank you. Anybody else?
I'd just like to say thank you to you two for speaking up and saying that. I seen some of the stuff that was put on Facebook, and most of the people that I saw that were saying and typing and saying what they said, obviously they don't know how long the 2 of you have been members of the community and the amount of service that you do give to the district and the community. So just thanks for speaking up and making everybody aware.
Okay.
Also with the winter conditions that are outside, just I heard a lot of people complaining about sidewalks and stuff like that over the weekend with the current snow. I mean, I understand that their sidewalk at home might be salted on a regular basis, but this is Michigan, and you can shovel a sidewalk and walk away, and 2 minutes later it can be drifted over. So we are human, but we are doing our best to make sure that stuff stays clear.
Okay, moving on. Committee reports. Budget and Finance. Jeff?
Budget and Finance Committee met on November 17th. We reviewed the monthly bills as well as reviewed the proposed organizational chart and how it affects the budget. We also were updated on some bond projects, including the status of the track and the rough plans for completion.
Thank you. Next, approval of consent agenda items. Motion would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Brian, do you want to introduce the two people? Because it includes a personnel report, and there are 2 new employees in the audience.
In the consent agenda are 2 of our employees that we recently hired are here. We have Heather Shalaktovitz. How'd I do? Okay. Our high school media center paraprofessional. We have Nicole Spratsky, who is the...
Stand up so everyone can see you.
Heather and Nicole is our GSRP Associate Teacher. Welcome.
Okay, it has been moved and supported. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, administrative items, interior and exterior signage. Brian?
Thank you. In your packet, you have the backup for the Phase 2 and Phase 3 of signage throughout the district. Phase 1 was the signage around the traffic circle and some stop signs over by Lee Elementary School, as well as building signage on the buildings, particularly the middle school, the board office at Lee Elementary School. Phase 2 of the signage would be the remaining ground signs. In your backup, there's a picture of what those would look like and the number and quantity of them. And then Phase 3 is the interior signage. As you look throughout our buildings, particularly at Lee Elementary School where the new construction was done, there are no signage on those classrooms, as well as throughout our district there are signage that have either fallen off the wall or been piecemeal back together, if you will. So this would replace all the room signage on all of our classrooms. It would be in compliance with ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, which would include Braille, as well as a slot to slide in either the teacher's name or staff member's name, and then a second slot to indicate whether that area is a ECD, electronic communications device, allowed room, whether it's acceptable or not. So looking at the bids, there were several that came in. 2 of them came in for the exterior signage. When you're looking at the, when I evaluated the bids, what I was looking for was the long lasting and the durability of the materials used, so that we're not back at this spot 5 years from now or during the summer as the streets are getting plowed, that the signs bend and sway, as well as the interior signage. The interior signage, there were several bidders that bid. 2 of them were very flimsy in nature in terms of the quality of them, and I have a sample if anybody'd like to see where the staying on the wall was a concern and the longevity of those signs. 2 of them were of better quality, so I'm recommending curb appeal. The sign that's in your backup, I don't have the one that says Richmond Community Schools, but it looks something like this, but it's a 2-slotted sign, and it would have the room number, Braille, and then our logo, Richmond Community Schools, on it. It would be in the color of the school district, which would be blue with the white, so, but it would be consistent throughout all of our buildings as we replace them. As we replace signage, one of the things to keep in mind, especially interior signage, is later on I'm going to talk about a report that we had a visit from the Office of Civil Rights, and they're making some of the recommendations. And as we make improvements, we need to make sure we consider our facilities are ADA compliant, whether it's how high we hang up the paper towel dispensers to soap dispensers, etc. And one of the things is when you're replacing signage, that whatever sign you go with, you need to include Braille on that signage to be in compliance. So I'm requesting that the board approve for a total for Phase 2 and Phase 3 of the signage. For a total of $50,000 for the exterior and interior signage. We have over 350 rooms in the district. When you look at the magnitude of our rooms, the quantity-wise is what carries that interior signage up, and the uniqueness of adding Braille and raised numbers.
Okay, there's a sample resolution.
I motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent and approve interior room signage and exterior directional and informational signage from Curb Appeal for a total not to exceed $50,000 with funding from the voter-approved 2013 bond is authorized as presented in the attached documentation.
Support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
Yeah, I got a question for Brian.
Mm-hmm.
For myself and the people in the room and viewers, how are we making sure that we're getting the best use of the bond money? So my question is priority of order. Is there an order now, or how do we know we're best using the funds available? I understand that the signage, this is a good cause. I'm not saying it's not a good cause, but how do we know we're best using our money that we have left from the bond?
What's the signage in, I'm going to answer that in two parts if you would let me. The signage, part of the bond had signage in it, especially in particular the new wing at the high school and the reconstruction at the elementary school. So when we started looking at the signage, one of the things we wanted to make sure was that we were consistent among the entire district. That's why the recommendation is to redo all the signage in the district. In terms of prioritizing and what's left in terms of the bond dollar, as I said, I think it was at the September board meeting, the procedures and protocols that the board put in place back in the spring in bidding, many of the bids came in under budget. And we have been dealing with some change orders that have happened. Site, you open the wall up and some things unexpected happen. But at some point, as we're getting near the end of the first phase of this bond, because the second phase would be the technology, the one-to-one, as a board, we need to sit down and say, okay, this is what money we have left. And looking at the projects we didn't tackle, how do we want to prioritize those projects next? And we've met with the Finance Committee, and it was October, and I think Vicki shared with them the budget of the what we spent to date with the bond on this past Monday, a week ago Monday. So there's going to be a set dollar amount that we're going to have to decide as a board what's the next priority from a long-term sustainability. There's some infrastructure costs that if a boiler were to go, that's a huge expense that our general fund would, or our, if you will, the fund equity that we have would just completely wipe that out. As we look at our 3 buildings and the age of the buildings. But
a boiler, the money from the bond can't go towards a boiler. It has to be money that
within the scope of what the voters approved for. So there in each of the bond applications for each school, and I don't remember all the categories, but there's a site work, there's a mechanical, there's electrical, there's subcategories that when we went to the voters last November, we said this is the scope that we were going to go and apply those bond dollars to. Some of that, there is some discretion the way it was worded, but it was very specific what we were looking for to the voters. So when the dust settles as we complete the addition, that topic is going to be up to the board to look at, okay, here's the money that's left. What could be projects that we could look at that would fit within the scope of the bond that the voters approve? Otherwise, it's not just an open checkbook for the board, let me put it that way. It's got to stay within the scope of what the voters approved.
All right, thanks for your clarification.
So it was at the budget and finance meeting that just happened, that you just talked about, it was mentioned as to where we're at with any contingency money?
I'm sorry, we didn't have a formal discussion on it. We looked at a spreadsheet that had what the original contract that was issued, and then any change orders that have came through since that original. And those change orders I've been communicating to you in the newsletter as I've been getting them through. And so we're at a point where I would expect, now I'm probably going to jinx myself, I would expect that those change orders would be minimal now that we've narrowed down and the bond is, if you will, ending without the addition of the first part.
But no discussion.
No, there's been no discussion.
There's been no discussion of any,
Correct.
anything.
Yes,
nothing.
Yeah, there's been no discussion.
Just because I was just curious if there was a dollar amount that we were at yet with any of that.
I wouldn't feel that we are at that point yet to talk about the dollar amount because there are several projects that are still underway that, as with any home renovation, you come across things that you didn't expect. One of the items is item E that we're going to talk about tonight in the process.
And so signage was originally a part of the plan. This is a broader scope.
Correct.
And so that's why this dollar amount is more than what was originally
Correct.
planned for.
Correct.
Got it.
And part of, because of, through the civil rights review, too.
Correct.
Because some of the stuff came about.
Right.
Because issues with that, you have to do something with some of that stuff, too, correct?
Correct. If
So
you looked
this-
at a
This
normal-
helps us be able to do that.
Yes, this would be to get us in compliance for, as we review. Though it wasn't a noted in the document as a finding, these are the things, there is a civil rights ADA manual. It's probably about 150, 200 pages long that literally explains that if you're redoing seating in an auditorium, based on how many seats are there, where handicap accessible seats are. If you're hanging paper towel dispensers in your restrooms, when we take those down and they break and we reinstall them, they have to be at ADA compliance. The mirrors, there has to be so many mirrors that are hung at a certain height level. There's a lot of logistics that we somewhat take for granted unless you're in that position of seeing it from that perspective.
Anybody else?
I would just say that the signage that's gone up so far seems very, very helpful and clarifies lots of things, I think, for community members who are new and also.
It is part of the bigger scope of a marketing plan for the district in terms of when we open that school of choice window. You know, Richmond, as many districts, has been faced with a declining enrollment. And so our goal is to plateau and increase that enrollment. And as we look for school of choice, parents who are willing to drive to Richmond and make that choice, one of the things that I've been focusing on is trying to create that very good first impression, because we're never going to get that back. So when they walk into our buildings, what they see, when they come to our grounds, what do they see? And so that this is why I'm strategically trying to position the district.
Okay, I'm going to do a roll call. Dan?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Bridget? Aye. I vote aye. Motion carries. Next, security swipe card readers. Brian?
Thank you. At one of our previous board meetings, we approved security cameras, and those are almost completely installed in all of our buildings from an infrastructure perspective. But also part of the bond application was security swipe cards. And in the bond application, it references 5 total district-wide security swipe cards. One at the elementary school, 2 at the middle school, and 2 at the high school. In working with the security vendors out and the possibilities of looking at that dollar figure, we were able to pretty much accomplish 16 swipe cards at various locations to provide, when we look at our facilities, the best access points. So for instance, at the elementary school, in the original plan was to have 1 security swipe card at the main entrance. But this allows us to put security swipe cards in the rear of the building so we can keep the building secure, and teachers would have access to get in and out of the building for recess and lunch duty through it. They don't have to bring their kids around the front or issue new keys. At the middle school, there's around the gymnasium and the main entrance. At the high school, there's key points where students and staff typically enter and exit the building. In your packet, you'll notice there are 5 quotes. The first 3 are for 5 swipe cards at the elementary school, 5 swipe cards locations at the middle school, and there are 6 swipe card readers, one of them being where our new addition is going to be when that's completed. And I attached the maps from the security cameras. This swipe card system that I'm recommending is in conjunction with our security camera system as 1 unit. The quote, the bottom 2 quotes, the one for $6,755 is for the license for security camera. Right now this would be for 16 software license, the rack that holds the connection of that feeds the information to the swipe card, the ID badge, the printers, etc., all that needs to create identification cards. And then the last quote is for $300, and it's to coordinate pushing the handicap button on the building to be right next to the security swipe cards. So if someone's, right now, the perfect example of the high school, if I'm in a wheelchair, I press the button, which is on the left of the front door. The main office buzzes the door that's to my right, but I need to press the handicap button that's on the wall. So it aligns and puts them all together. So if I'm in a wheelchair or a handicapped person, I'm in one spot, I press the button, and once they release the button, I can press the door to automatically open. It gets us into compliance from that angle. So as a totality, the original, the total budget is for $52,179, which is a significant increase in our security than what was originally planned for when the bond started. So I'm recommending that we go with Peripheral Vision, which is the company that does our security cameras, for a total of $52,179.
Okay, there's a sample resolution.
I motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent to increase the contract to Perennial Vision by $52,179 for the total net not to exceed $198,170.32 for security cameras and swipe card readers for the funding from the 2013 voter-approved bond is authorized as presented in the attached document.
Support. That was Bridget. It's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
I guess let me just ask a question. If Brian, if you have any input, do you got any feedback from the customers in the buildings yet with the cameras that have gone up so far?
There has been a lot of rumors and stories and feedback. The high school staff have been used to it. Security cameras are not new to the high school setting. They are relatively new to the elementary and middle school in terms of the scope and size. As we've heard stories or rumors, I've been trying to adjust them. One of the rumors out there is that the security cameras will pick up when a staff member leaves their office and it will track how much time they're out. That is a misnomer. Who created it, I don't know. But I've just been addressing it with staff. The importance is with the security cameras, in this day and age, for the security of our students as well as our staff, we want to make sure that, God forbid something does happen in our building, that we can get the person who did it. And this security swipe system is going to prevent people from coming in our building by providing only staff members who have access to our building to get in, and then security cameras to monitor. If something were to happen in a hallway or after hours, we'll be able to find the culprit.
Okay, I just wondered.
But it is a new phenomenon for the elementary and middle school. High school, I don't want to say it's second nature, but they're used to the security cameras. There's more security cameras. It gets access outside of our buildings too, so we can watch and monitor our ground, especially after hours.
All right, thanks.
So we're looking at the plan. You're saying in here is by the first, right after the first of the year, this is all going to be online. So we're going to be able to eliminate all of these people that we know out there in the world that have keys to our buildings. And
the plan is once the security system, the swipe card system is up, and we have the staff that we've issued the swipe cards to, whether they're a lunch supervisor, whatever their position is in our district. Once that is up and running, then the keys on our doors, except for at the security points, would be blanked out so that there would be no reason for any staff member who currently has a key to our building to use that key. They would use their swipe card. And the swipe card allows you to provide a timed access. So for instance, if we have one of our coaches who doesn't work in our district but is here after hours, then his or her swipe card would be programmed for after school till the appropriate time in the evening. Some districts are issuing the security swipe cards to latchkey parents, and you're allowed access to the building between 6:30 in the morning and the time school starts, so they swipe it by the door, come in and drop their student off, and then leave. But it will not allow them in the building after a certain point. So we have that programming capability in who has access to our building. And part of it is the concern with the amount of technology that the community has entrusted us and invested in. We want to make sure that's protected. When we get to that one-to-one technology, we want to make sure we know who is in our buildings and that they're in our building for the proper usage.
So if you have a building that you're not going to have the swipe cards at every single door?
No. For instance, if at the high school, the swipe cards would be at the main entrance, the two side doors, down by the auditorium, and then by the new addition, the 6 spots.
So I'm kind of confused at how it all is going to work. So if I'm a teacher, am I going to swipe my card and the door's going to unlock?
There's 2
Or do I have
options
to
that we
put-
can opt for swipe cards. We can either issue ID badges, or you know those little key that you put on your key. It's a device that you can hold up to like the mobile station and wave it, and it charges your card. That we can issue those to staff too, where they just wave it, and it allows them to come in and out of the building at those entrances. If they come into they wouldn't be allowed to get into the building at an entrance that doesn't have a swipe card access reader. And it's a little black box that gets attached right outside the door, and you just hold whether your badge up or your swipe card right next to it, and it unlocks the door. What the system allows us to do, if we ever have to go in lockdown, it will actually lock the doors so no swipe card readers are accessible. It allows us that if someone is propping doors open, the security cameras are reading who's coming in and out of our buildings from a security perspective. So for instance, at Lee Elementary School, there's 5. There's the main entrance. There's down when you walk in the main school, to the right is a 200 hallway. At that door, because if staff park in that side parking lot, they can enter the building from that door. Down by the gymnasium and the rear of the building by the playground. So teachers would take their kids out for recess. Right now, if they don't have my key, I can prop the door open, I can put a wedge in there. This allows us not to prop those doors open, and I just swipe my card back in.
But if they're out there for recess, they're only going to be able to go in and out of that one door?
No, they can enter any, based on your card. If I'm a teacher, and let's say we program the time to be that you can get in our buildings from, and these parameters have not yet been decided, but let's say we decide teachers' access is from 6:30 in the morning till 3:30 at night. I can come and go into the building that I'm assigned to just by swiping my card during that time. If I'm assigned to the elementary school, I do not have access to the high school or middle school. If I have teachers that are shared between 2 buildings, then they'd have access to both of those.
Yeah, what I'm saying though is if you're at one end of the elementary school outside and opposite of the key, the reader, and something happens, whether it be a rabid coyote comes out of the woods back there after you and the kids, you have to run all the way to the other door to get in?
No, when you look at the map, and I think there's a map in your
there's a map
that helps. We tried to position the swipe card so that where teachers access the building, in and out. So for instance, the main down by the kindergarten and 1st grade hallway, a lot of classrooms that go out that hallway to go to recess, there's a swipe card reader there. So if I'm out on the recess, I can just come in that one. Or out by the gymnasium, so if the gym teacher's taking kids outside or class is going out that door. At the end of the hallway that goes out to the parking lot or the bus loop in the main door. The only door that is not is at the end of the, I don't have my glass on, I think that's 300 hallway, because when you walk out that door, it really goes to just an empty field. It doesn't go out to the playground or anything. So there's no swipe card there. That door would be key blank, so that if I have a key, I can't get in the building. I got to use my swipe card.
And it says only key personnel designated by the superintendent will be issued a key for the new key cores.
So
How
key
big is that?
personnel would be your building principal, because if they ever have to do a lockdown or something that they have to get in and out, your building principal would have a key, or your building administrators, your head custodian or the custodian at the building, because they have to be able to take trash out and get back into the building. But where we position the swipe cards, they're right by trash, so I don't necessarily know if we'll need to. Myself, the maintenance person who goes around and repairs, but they would just be, our goal is to get very few people issued a key to this district, and you have to use a swipe card by programming. And if I have multiple positions, I'm a latchkey person, I am a lunch supervisor, and I coach. I could have 3 different program times that allow me access based on my position that I have. So what we started doing is developing groups of who would be in, from a teacher, administrator, because right now, multiple people have keys to our building, and they could come and go without anybody knowing that they're in the building. And this would prevent that except during the designated time. Now, if exceptions have to be made, there's a volleyball needs to get in on a Sunday because for whatever reason they need to practice. We can literally log in from the system from anywhere that there's web access.
Okay, that was my next question, because I know a lot of the athletics, their schedules as far as practices go are always.
But the idea is to create a broad enough range that it's an acceptable time frame for the athletics to come in. I mean, someone in our buildings at 10, 11, 12, 1 in the morning, really, there would be really no reason for someone to be in that building. Now watch, I say that, someone's going to have a legitimate reason. But that's the idea of the swipe card. And it minimizes tremendously who has keys and access to our building. I know when I first got here, and I'll tell you a story, the second week there was a softball tournament in the back of it was a huge softball tournament. It was, I think it was the week of July 7th or something like that. And there was a parent who was who had a key to our buildings, and if as a new person, I'm trying to figure out why that person would have a key. And so however the system was put in place prior, this is going to clean it up and limit people have access to the building, those who have business in our buildings.
So the takeaway for me, it's going to be safer, it's going to controlled access environment, and it's programmable. So we'll have control to change however you see fit.
Right. We don't have to keep ordering keys and reissuing keys and keeping the master log of it's all programmable, and you can see at any time who's coming in and out of our building.
I like the whole remote thing too. You know, if you're a coach and you show up and it's not working, you can pick up the phone and call rather than have parents showing up to drop their kids off and standing out in the cold or what have you.
So as long as you're not doing anything wrong, you got nothing to worry about. That's the bottom line. So.
Right. I mean, you know, swipe card system is what I used for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Right. Into school, and it's just is a real easy system, and it is just a matter of swiping the card and poof, the door opens. You know, I mean, it just is. It's the way it works. And would there, I know there are sometimes, Sunday afternoon is the time that I can do lesson plans, and I need to be in my classroom doing that kind of work. So when we're looking at kind of the time frame of when, would there be flexibility if the teacher said to a building principal on a Friday, Sunday afternoon is my time, I got to come in here and I'm going to be here 4 hours.
Our intent is not to take away from what our staff does for the kids in the district, because many of our staff are, they're here Sunday, Saturday afternoons, late nights, and is to allow them, but it also allows them when they are here by themselves to feel safe that only people who have access to our buildings can get in that building. Because there's many times that I personally have been here late at night, and there's people who have access to our building that I don't necessarily know them yet as a face-to-face, but they have access at some point. They would get them.
Doors are locked. Right. Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call. Andy?
Aye.
Bridget?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Next, Student Athlete Code of Conduct Handbook, first reading. Mr. Benoit?
Well, Mr. Benoit comes up to the podium, I'm just going to kind of summarize what we've done. Back in October, the board had directed me to review the student athletic handbook at the time, and we did that. Mr. Benoit and Dr. Myler and I met many, many times. We had a lot of healthy and heated discussions, both good, on the good end, trying to figure out how do we adjust the athletic handbook to meet the needs of the tenor of the board's conversation during a previous meeting, as well as what we feel is the best interest for our student athlete. This handbook has been out for review to the community. On the slide on the screen and in your board packet is the survey results. We had 50 of our families opt, most of them being parents and head coaches. We actually had some that were community members who have no children in the district. So what I've asked Mr. Benoit to talk about is each of the give a summary of the handbook and the sections and talk about the changes in that handbook. In your board packet, you should have a strike through document. This is what was reviewed. So what was presented to staff or to the coaches and parents and families regarding the changes. So, Mr. Benoit.
Thank you, Mr. Walmsley, and I would like to echo his comments about the efforts, along with Dr. Mylart and Mr. Walmsley, myself. Many hours of good, healthy dialogue to take a look at this and bring this proposal to you tonight in the current form that it's in. And thank you to Mr. Walmsley for putting out the SurveyMonkey questions, provided us with some excellent feedback. Essentially, the beginning of the student athletic code of conduct, the first page or two is basically an introduction. And the only thing that we took a look at was some, and this is consistent through each section going forward, is some language cleanup, taking a look at some things that may have been outdated or things that have changed over the years. So essentially, the only thing in the beginning or introduction would be some language that we had changed.
And Jim, do you want us, as you're going along, if we have something, a question or anything, to just stop you as you're going?
Yes, ma'am. I think that works best.
Okay.
Certainly, yep, anytime.
We'll just raise our hand or,
yep.
Okay.
And if my memory isn't the best, I'm sure Dr. Mylart or Mr. Walmsley could help answer any questions.
All right, thank you.
With regard to that, in looking at the introduction prior to section 1, if anyone had a question, I'd be happy to answer it.
I just have a question with just the language at the very end of the first paragraph. Student athlete expectations need to be adhered to 24 hours per day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Can you just explain what that means? I mean, I know that time frame, but I guess what the thought process was. That language has been here in the past, so it's not a change, but
Correct.
Where are we coming from with that?
But we just, I think the discussion centered around the fact that if you're a student athlete, you're a student athlete. That's who you are. In season, out of season, you still represent the program, the school, yourself. So I think that was the premise of that.
Some of the conversations were many of our student athletes participate in community events outside of their season. And I'll give the example that the Richmond Good Old Days Parade, you have the wrestlers who are there. And even though it's not wrestling season, they're representative as Richmond wrestlers, or they'll attend community function. And so, though the community may not know they're in season, they recognize them as one of our athletes. And what we tried to present here is guidelines that, because of that status that the community has, that there's an expectation that you hold yourself, if you will, at a higher level, because you represent us in many out of the classroom events and activities. So that was the conversation. I know it doesn't. I don't mean to speak for any board members, so if I'm misspeaking myself, let me know. You know, sometimes kids, when they're not in a season, may make poor choices. Kids, they're kids. We want them to learn from their mistakes before they become adults. However, at the time they make those choices, I don't think the community or whoever's involved in that is saying, okay, is this, at this point, are they a wrestler, are they a basketball player during that time? They just associate them as a student athlete. So the expectations in the handbook is that if you're choosing to join the athletic program in our district, know that the community looks at you in a different light and somewhat of a higher expectation because you're in that limelight, if you will. So I answered your question.
You did. I just, you know, this is not language that's in every other student handbook. And so I guess my concern is that we do have summer vacation when kids are kids. And so I would expect if a coach is going to take a team during the summer to go and do something as a team, because that happens, that this handbook would follow them even if it was in the summer. But we do have a summer vacation, and kids can be kids and not feel as though 365 days a year. I don't know, I have some issues, I guess, with the idea that we're kind of watching them all the time. I don't know, it just feels a little over the top to me.
Are we saying, we're saying, because as a student athlete, you're elevated when you set the limelight because they're showcased, I guess, is what we're looking at. So if you're a student, a Richmond Community Schools student, you're not expected to act appropriately in the community and do all that kind of stuff. Is that part of the student handbook as well? Do we not expect a regular student to uphold all of those standards as well?
I don't think we want to, no, I'm not saying that a regular student who's not participating in the athletic program shouldn't be held to the high standards we have. I can't speak directly because I don't have the student code of conduct, whether that's referenced in there, and I don't know it as intimately as I do the athletic handbook. But the idea is
it, I mean, Keith, is it?
I don't know if it's referenced.
Do we say that?
In the student handbook, is there a provision that if someone misbehaves or makes a poor choice during the summer, that the student handbook is applied? I don't think there is, but I don't know that off the top for sure.
Well, no, that's because it's sports law. You mean other activities, or you're talking to students? Because this is a privilege.
This is what I'm saying.
I mean, what do you?
We're saying, I guess I'm trying to, what Tracy's question is, we're putting this specific type language because we're saying that athletics is a privilege and you're in the limelight, because this is what Brian said, the limelight. So you're elevated, you're more out there than a regular student. So that would be the reason for this language.
I would say the expectations are high because you're talking about the athletic code of conduct. I mean, we're not talking about activities code of conduct, we're not talking clubs code of conduct. I mean, this is specifically this athlete code of conduct. So this is going.
But there are other ways that kids get to be in the limelight.
I didn't say that.
Right, in a school district, and so.
I mean, that would be, I think that'd be another conversation, activities, handbook, or clubs handbook.
Okay,
But
okay.
this is athletics.
Okay.
And that was one of our conversations as we met, was to look at establishing not only the athletics, but the extracurricular activities. Should there, as a district, we have an expectation of, if you're going to be participating in extracurricular activities that represent the district, whether I'm a key club member or a student leadership or whatever, that there's not a handbook, if you will, for them that says if you're going to choose these groups, then this is our expectation when you're not during school time and how you behave and represent the district. We did have that conversation as part of our next phase as a result of this.
So I would just say that in reading through this today, there's nothing to me in here that says a kid can't be a kid. If he's on summer vacation, then he should be a kid and do what kids do as teenagers. But you can't do something, to me, something that's not going to pass the grandmother test. Then you shouldn't do it because you may be held accountable for doing it. Now, just last week, I had the opportunity to see the national letter of intent. Two of those gentlemen signed that thing. And one of the ones I said to one of them, I said, hey, this is the beginning, not the end. Exactly. Now the spotlight's on you even more. You make one little mistake, and you're going to see it for the rest of your life. So people are watching you. As a student athlete, you are watched, especially if you're You're someone that's in the paper or whatever. So I kind of understand what we're trying to say here to the student athletes.
Okay. I just think that if a kid is with buddies on the 4th of July and there's a mistake made, I just don't know. I don't know that I agree with the idea that that filters into what happens during the school year, because it's the 4th of July. I just don't know that I agree with that. But
one of the things that we're going to see later on, that if a student in that situation does make a mistake, one of our missions and goals for students is teach them responsibility. And the handbook does allow this window that if I make a mistake and recognize and own up to it, there's a, if you will, a different level of punishment to get the student that help that he or she may need. Whereas if I recognize my mistake and see if I can keep it under the radar, and then it is found out, there's a different level to try to help students. So maybe when we get to that point, it would help you. If not, we can further discuss this.
right.
Is there a definition of, we've said that made a mistake. Well, what is a mistake? I mean, to me, my mistake is probably different than everybody else's here.
I think when we get to a later part in the handbook, hopefully we'll clarify that.
And with regard to the rest of the introduction on page 2, again, mostly language. In fact, most common terms you'll see in there is we changed everything to student athlete. And then page 3 begins section 1 under rules of eligibility and participation. One of the things we wanted to address in here, and this came from Mr. Walmsley, was how can we make sure parents and community members and students know that components in the handbook that are associated with MHSAA guidelines are noted. And this would be a very good example of that. So letter A, enrollment, MHSAA regulations, section 1A. So this indicates, this is a way for us to indicate to community members and parents that these guidelines come from the MHSAA, and we are simply just letting people know that these are those guidelines, and we're noting where they could go if they needed to do some research and wanted to find where they could get that information. So enrollment is section 1A, age regulations, section 2A, and we cleaned up some language under letter C with student athlete, parent guardian consent. You can see some of the language that we referred to here. In addition, we also indicated here would be a good example, the first of many examples in which at the end of this document there are certain attachments that parents may need to see. So these are noted throughout, and this is one area where attachment 1 is noted at the end of the handbook. Yes, ma'am.
Jim, where it talks about the enrollment, where it says Ann must be enrolled in the school for which he or she competes, should that be and or because of school of choice? I mean, is that right? Because you can be school of choice and compete. That just says and must be enrolled.
You have to be, if I'm a school of choice, I am enrolled in Richmond, and there's a time frame that you have to be enrolled in.
Yeah, but it says must reside in school service area in which he or she attends and must be enrolled.
Oh, and or because of the school of choice. I see
Yeah,
what you're
I'm
saying.
saying, just to me, you would think it should say and or, don't you think? I mean, I know you got it right from the MHSAA, but to me, that's,
yes.
To me, it should say and or.
Yes. Thank you.
Or if everybody's under the understanding that that's what it.
But that's what it means, but.
Right, right. Thank you.
Is there a homeschool component in athletics?
Homeschool students are allowed to, under the homeschool regulations, participate in non-core and extracurricular activities. This handbook does not speak to homeschool, but it,
the state does not allow homeschool students to participate in athletics.
Really?
Okay. Since when?
Because I know that they're allowed to participate in other extracurricular things, so.
Right, but the MHSA does not allow homeschool students to participate.
And we could may want to make a statement in there, which we could put in there to address that, so it's
Yeah, I
clarified
just think
for
it's-
homeschool
that's
and involved.
continues to be a growing community, so might want to make a statement.
Thank you. Page 4 in your document continues with the remaining parts of section 1 and concludes with seasons of competition and semester of eligibility. And as you can see, they're again pointing out the area in the MHSA regulation. Any questions on section 1? Any other questions on section 1?
Just on the athletic academic eligibility, down where it says if a student athlete withdraws from a class and it is deemed a drop fail, the student becomes immediately academically ineligible. Just when you were looking at those Survey Monkey questions when people were commenting, just a question, and Deb, you would know if they drop a class. One question was if they there's a specific reason they have to drop it. I can't remember what the question was.
We had one, I think one of the questions was if it was a student was in a PE class and they got injured and they had to drop that class because of the injury.
Yeah, it was something like an extenuating circumstance reason, and so that automatically makes them ineligible. I mean, there's right, it doesn't, right? So there's specific circumstances where that doesn't.
This is for a student who is failing the class, and all of a sudden now they just want to drop it.
Okay.
And it would be deemed a drop fail. There's actually a slip that you got to fill out that says a drop fail on it.
Okay.
It's not one that there's a special circumstance.
Okay.
That's the person who would be immediately
Okay.
removed from.
That's what that means. Okay.
Thank you. Section 2 refers to the athletic academic eligibility and once again points out MHSA regulations section 7A with regard to 66% of their classes need to be passed. And then you can see where we added the component about Richmond Community Schools requires a student athlete pass 100% of his or her classes with a 60% or higher to participate on an athletic team. So that's where we landed on that. And we struck out some other language.
Hey, Jim, go back to just the section 2, just a clarification. It might reduce the document by a page or two if we, you've already spelled out MHSAA once, so you shouldn't have to do it all over in the document, so.
Noted.
Thank you. Page 5 goes through letters A and B for more clarification and explanation for section 2. And also in section B refers to another attachment, just again to help communicate with parents so they have all the information that they're going to need when they're looking at this document. Also talking about in letter C, eligibility check, academic ineligibility notification, and also some language in letter E on reference to E2020 and makeups.
You'll see referenced in here, superintendent or designee of the superintendent. The intent is once this is approved, that there's a cover sheet that has the title and that identifies for the 2014-15 school year, the designee of the superintendent is and the name. As if there's personnel changes and so forth, title changes, whatever it is, that we look at this each year and then publish it each year with the correct personnel that it would refer to.
Well, also that, that's just consistent language in all policies.
That's where we need to move to.
Right. That language is present.
Any other questions with regard to section 2? There were some comments made on the survey relative to students who may struggle or maybe have some sort of learning disability. And of course, we do take into account and work with teachers and students. And if someone is doing their absolute best, the teachers do a great job of monitoring that and communicating that with administration and coaches. But it was nice to see that kind of feedback. I like that. Section 3 refers to awards. MHSA regulation, section 11. And they cannot exceed any dollar amount over $25.
And how do we establish $25?
How did the MHSA come up with $25?
Yeah,
I know.
see it changed from 15, but I'm just wondering what the rationale is on 25.
I don't know, but there was a comment back on the survey that
Yeah.
I believe the words were, in this day and age,
yeah.
$25 is not a lot of money, and truly it is not.
Did that recently changed?
Dr. Mylar, do you know when that changed?
Because when I was in school, I remember it being 25.
Just before I started, I would say maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I think the rationale is the cost of the sweatshirt.
What we don't want to do is position any athlete to jeopardize any scholarship eligibility just for a violation of something they received on nobody's intentional behalf, but just so I make sure it's clear.
And you're right, Mr. Robbins. That's really important for student athletes and parents to know. And we wouldn't want someone to get tripped up, especially with regards to eligibility or their future. Any other questions about that? Next one was maintaining amateur status, short section. Again, looking at student athlete is some verbiage.
Jim?
Yes, ma'am.
B there, I know on one of the, on the survey, the comment was, why weren't all the sports listed? I know that bowling was one that was pointed out. That it wasn't
Right.
listed on there.
Right. I noticed
so
that too.
So I think maybe we should
Cheerleading as well.
And cheer was another one. So maybe we want to include those.
And I know this, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Mylar, this comes right out of the MHSA handbook,
does?
right? Yeah.
Bowling considered a club sport.
Oh, that's why, that's why.
These are
Yeah,
sanctioned sports.
that
by
would be
MHSA,
why, that
and
it's
club
not there,
sports wouldn't
yep.
be listed there.
Yep, that's right, okay.
That's a good question, thank you.
Okay.
Moving on to section 5, outside of school athletic competition.
We should add to it.
Again, just some cleaning up
We
of
should add to
a
it.
little bit of
Could we-
verbiage.
Could we add that, though? I mean, could it hurt if a kid did do something? Because there are kids that get scholarships for bowling, correct? And cheer, I mean, could that hurt them if they were to?
You can't have a lower bar, you can always have a higher bar as a district.
Exactly.
So if we wanted to include
Yeah.
that, we always could.
Right? I mean, we wouldn't want to hurt them.
Well, alleviate loopholes.
Right.
Because it's going to be an issue at some point in the future,
Sure.
so
Sure.
we should change it to whatever we need to put on there.
Any questions from section 5, and that is, again, some language from MHSA. Okay, section 6, refers to student attendance and the requirement for athletics, participating in contests or practices. Any questions with regard to that? Section 7, attendance at athletic practice sessions and contests. Not much change there, if any, just some language. Talks about failure to comply. Struck out a little bit of the language there. Section 8 talks about traveling to and from away contests. And there's also a reference to another attachment in there.
You'll notice in that section 7 in your packet, if you've got the colored version in front of you, you'll see some green writing or verbal. After we took the feedback from the survey, anything in green is a result of that survey feedback. So some of the concerns of, what if I'm a parent at the game and I want to say I want to take my son home with me, not riding on the bus, or daughter home with me, as long as the coach has spoken directly with the parent, it allows that flexibility for the coach's behalf, that if it wasn't written ahead of time, the idea is that kids get home to and from safely with the right personnel, that they're not traveling as a group of kids in a car. So.
Okay, and section 9, uniforms and equipment. Pretty standard regulation there. Section 10 is something we spent a lot of time discussing. There is there's some changes to section 10 with regard to the way it used to look. It used to have two categories, if you will. One umbrella dealt with alcohol, tobacco. The other umbrella talked about other drugs, conduct. And what we are proposing is to put this all under one umbrella. Illegal substances for students is illegal substances. And so that's what we wanted to propose to you tonight. We did take a look at this, and we added or kind of refined the self-disclosure component, where student athlete can self-disclose under section 10 with regard to any of those violations there or any of those mistakes. And then later on in section 10 talks about consequences for self-disclosure. The students would have two options there, which is not new. That in itself is not new, but there's some language there that's new. And then we defined how self-disclosure could look for a student on page 10, and how that window will be addressed. That student has 30 days to self-disclose, or self-disclose before notification, district notification through police or other agencies or staff or Board of Education. So their window is defined by either A, 30 days, or when we are notified, whichever is less. So they may have 30 days or they may have a day, essentially.
Again, the idea here is that if a student does make a mistake, regardless of what the mistake is, that if they realize their mistake, our intent here is to get every coordinated effort to get the student help so that they don't repeat that mistake. And if it deals with drugs or alcohol, get them into some type of program so that they can turn their life around and be successful. We don't want them falling in a trap. But if we have a student that chooses, knows the mistake they made and chooses not to self-regulate, then that's where the penalties get a little stiffer from the perspective of what used to be in the policy. The conversation regarding combining these two is when we looked at our student athlete, if I'm a 16-year-old student, whether I'm smoking, drinking, or doing drugs, it's illegal for me, period. Regardless of whether one's a legal substance by law and one isn't. For me in my age group, it's illegal and you shouldn't be doing it. So if you are doing it, we've given you the option of self-disclosing here, and let's get the student the help they need and turn them around.
So page 10 will kind of outline the consequences if they self-disclose, and page 11 refers to consequences for those that do not self-disclose.
And the options, option 1, option 2, both of them include the random drug testing?
Yeah, so that potentially could be an expense for the district, but there are several inexpensive kits that you can get that I think if we're really, we looked at this as we want to help the kids turn the track or go a different path, and if we can help them in whatever we're doing, that I personally think it's a good thing to have. And depending on the severity of the issue, I mean, it could be just a one-time 4th of July party that I'm at, and it's a one-time offense, or this has been it was a serious problem with drugs or alcohol. So the amount of drug testing and it says superintendent or his or designee. We're going to bring everybody to the table and say, okay, what's in the best interest for this child that we have or this student?
Any other questions from section 10? Section 11 simply outlines something that may not be covered in section 10. So it gives us another option there in case there's something that comes up not covered in section 10, and does allow people to have a hearing by the Athletic Review Committee, which is outlined in section 22. Section 12, summer and off-season programs. Section 13, school community conduct. Not much there as far as changes. Any questions on those sections?
I can say on page 13 about section 14, the remainder of the day's contest and the next day's competition is an MHSA regulation. So some of the language, as we said earlier, is right from the handbook that we don't have much discretion on.
Yeah, and I think it's important. Mr. Walmsley brings up a good point. That is something that student athletes should be well aware of, because if you're a basketball player and you miss today's game, or part of today's game because of something on a Tuesday night, okay, you may be out Friday night's game. Conversely, if you're a baseball player or a softball player, you may be on a Friday, and the first game of a doubleheader, something happens, not only are you out the rest of that game, but the second game of that day, Friday, and if you're in a tournament the next day, and you have 3 games or 4 games or 5 games, that's why it says day of competition. So it's important for student athletes to understand that. Section 14, athletic team participation, and 15 is our pay to participate, and 16, citizenship and conduct during the school year. Some changes there in terms of verbiage with regard to, again, designee of the superintendent, student athlete. Any questions on 14, 15? Oh, good. 16 is the citizenship and conduct during the school year. We did take a look at that quite a bit. We did talk about that a lot. That received a lot of dialogue, especially when we got to in season versus out of season. Section 17 refers to tardies. 18 is, I'm sorry? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it? I'm going to say this. The comment on the survey, thank you. Couldn't that kind of be true in the sense that you've got a teacher that doesn't really mark tardies, someone who does, so there's a kid who gets held for the tardies and another kid doesn't?
Doesn't make any difference, there's still tardies during the class. And even Mr. Bordeaux and I, we've really been watching our teachers and kind of working with them. We're seeing kids that aren't getting tardies, we're having conversations. I don't think we have that even.
Okay, okay.
But it is appropriate that, based on that comment, that if there is a staff member who's not following the policy of when they mark kids tardy coming to class, then as the administrative team, we need to address that with that staff member to make sure they're following the outlying policy, that at certain points in the class, a child comes in late, they're supposed to be marked tardy. And I think what Ms. Michon's saying is, as they're monitoring it, if they've had to have that conversation, they're having that conversation with staff, to try to prevent what the comment indicating that, you know, okay, I like you, Margaret, so I'll let you slide. No, there's a policy that's been established, and we need to follow that from a manager, because that policy is put in place to monitor, you know, from our own pupil accounting purposes and what we can account for credits, et cetera. So we got to make sure that's being followed.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Section 18 is clean in terms of changes. Section 19, dress code.
Wait.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Okay, with 18, what about where we're talking about student athletes not being in building without a coach and that? What happens with all the coaches that we do have that come either from other buildings within the district or those who coach from outside, way outside the district that are coming in? What happens to those players when those coaches are coming from other school districts in that? Well, how does this policy affect?
I would look at that last line where it says, or authority of a building staff member. So if we have a coach that's not a teacher and that we have made arrangements for the students to meet in the cafeteria to work on a homework till that, there's an arrangement or an approval that is given those students to be in our buildings at that time. That's where I would see that.
That's where that
would
line
allow that to be to operate, function.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. In fact, on my way out today, as I was down in the gym area, and there was a young man in the cafeteria doing his homework, and was able to chat with him for a little while as he was waiting for his turn to get in the gym. Dress code and hairstyles. Again, just making sure the coaches articulate that policy to the student athletes.
Oh, okay. Stop you there. Sorry. I just have a real problem that we're telling kids that color they can or can't have their hair.
Me as well. I just have a problem with that.
I just think that's ridiculous.
In the survey, that was probably the one that was the closest in terms of agreeing and disagreeing from the community's perspective, parents and student athletes.
Can I just kind of point out, isn't there a tradition in a program that this happens when they reach a certain level?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Well, in the past, when I was working here, there was a tradition of a certain program when that did happen. The whole team did that before they went.
Usual hair color, they all dye their hair black.
Well,
when I was here, it was
they dyed it other colors than black.
So I'm just saying that we want to make sure that our practice matches the policy.
Regardless, they've dyed it other colors than black, but I don't know. I just think that's ridiculous to say that we're going to tell them what color they can or can't have their hair. support that.
Mr. Walmsley's correct, that one was 50% to 32%.
If the board would like me to redo that language, I would be more than happy to relook at that language. But I mean, we can, if you want to do it at the end or at the beginning, if there's anything in particular.
There's just two of us that said it, but.
I don't have a problem with it unless it's, you know, for a certain team, if they're doing it as a team or a spirit type of thing, then I think they should be allowed to do it, but.
So is the tenor that if it's, the team wants to, you know, dye their hair blue to go to an event, if it's kind of a team norm, that's,
Well,
is
it
that
says
the
discretion on, by you, designee of the superintendent. I mean,
No.
I mean, I don't know, because sometimes it depends like what the motive is behind that though. You know, if there's one student that's just, I don't know, I think it needs to be a.
I think the intent around the original language, and
I
I
want-
was not here, but based on the conversation was, as our student athletes attend events outside, we want to make sure they represent the district from a first impression perspective. And I'm not saying that red hair doesn't look good on someone, or orange hair, but this has been in there for.
I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I don't want to have a Dennis Rodman, so to speak, somebody that's showing up and making a distraction, and by having crazy hair every different day in game.
I think that there are kids that wouldn't touch their hair, but could potentially disrespect what it means to represent Richmond schools and not even have any color in their hair but natural. So I don't think hair color has anything to do with it, frankly.
It is. In this, my perspective, in this day and age, we got bigger things to worry about than hair color. How about
Exactly.
tattoos, piercings, all kinds of other stuff. I'm getting soft in my old age, but I really don't care about.
In the end, it says at the discretion.
Is it the discretion? I say,
So in the
I
end-
keep it in there.
It doesn't even need to be in there.
I mean, I've got a niece that every time I go home, she's got a different hair color. It's just something they do. I don't understand it, but.
If the first line was it, if the coach set the standard at the beginning of the season saying as the wrestling team or as the cheerleading team or as the volleyball team, this is the dress code, I expect you to, you know, wear a shirt and tie to the game, or if that was it, in this section, whatever that coach is, would that satisfy from the board's perspective?
Well, it's in there for a reason.
Well, I
It's no,
think-
somebody just didn't.
I don't know, yeah, I just don't know the reason why
Right.
that got put in there.
That's where I'm coming from on it.
I think it goes back to that they are representing Richmond High School. And back when we first originally talked about it, that we didn't want people, I didn't want a basketball team or my board with a green hair, red hair, blue hair, purple hair, pink hair, red hair, whatever, that you are representing Richmond High School and that we want you to look a certain way, be it, you know, we wear shirts and ties during the day when the basketball team, or when they go, they wear shirts and ties, because they're representing our school, and how do we feel about that?
So if I had green hair, that would make me not effective?
You're representing, what are people gonna say? That's
She had
all
green
I'm-
hair and a mohawk,
that image.
probably not.
Depending on the school you attend, it's standard, depending on the school. It might not be standard here in Richmond, but in other schools, it's kind of the standard thing to have a strip of red or green or purple.
I'm just saying, it's that image you portray, and we always talk about image. It may not be, I'm not saying it is or that, it's just that's that image.
Section 20 refers to supplemental rules and regulations. We're looking at designee of the superintendent, building administrator. Nothing new there. 21 deals with carryover penalties.
Wait.
Yes, ma'am.
The last paragraph, what does that mean?
Which section?
Still in 20.
athletic director, if there's reason to exclude someone for supplemental rules, let me read out loud here so I can make sure. Supplemental rules and regulations can be unique to the sport may be implemented upon approval. So for instance, if there is and we asked my team to fill in, if the varsity basketball coach said you need to wear a shirt and tie, and that's the expectation and rule, that's a supplemental rule to this.
Okay.
Yes.
And if
Nope.
I don't wear it,
Good. Got it.
then
Yes.
you're excluded
Yeah.
from today's game because you didn't part with that, am I?
Yes, that's exactly what we
Got it.
discussed. Some programs may have additional supplemental team.
Got it.
Green hair today.
Okay.
That's covered there.
So if you wear green hair, you can't play.
Section 21
Got it.
is carryover penalties. Sometimes if someone is suspended, that suspension can't be fully served under one season. It may carry over to the next time they happen to play that sport. And 22 was referenced earlier about the appeal process.
We have to take the 22 and talk about 22 on the appeal process. In the previous athletic handbook, there was an appeal process. And if you look on page 17 of the handbook, the striked out language talked about who was on that appeal process. What we tried to accomplish here was looking at the students' due process and was there a process that was followed. And the appeal process, that if I feel I've been unjustly given a discipline for any of these infractions in the booklet, that there is an appeal process. And one of the things you're going to note in the OCR report was we need to put this process for multiple aspects of the organization that they have an appeal process. And so we had just outlined what we're looking for in the appeal. We tried to create it to be an objective group outside of those that have been intimately involved in any of the discipline before. The request comes to my office first. What I'm looking for is the appeal, is there some validity for the appeal? And if there is, it goes on to the review committee. And the review committee consists of 5 members. The athletic director or the designee of the superintendent, 2 athletic coaches not participating in the activity, so if it's a football player, maybe a baseball or softball coach, some teachers, and 1 other administrator from the district. My role in that process is just to present, here's the facts that I've been given, here's the letter of information I've been given by the parent, this is the discipline, these are the components of the handbook that were followed. This committee is then looking at that and then making a decision, hearing both parts of the appeal. One of the things that's noticed is that the people involved in the appeal should be the student athlete, their parents, and the appeal committee. Those that are directly involved in any infraction or to be looked at. The committee's decision would then be communicated by me in writing. So once they've heard the hearing, it may not be necessarily that night the decision's been made or that the parents told, but the committee makes the decision that night, and then we formalize it with writing. In the previous handbook, it did have that the committee's action is final once it went through that appeal process. And we felt, looking at who was in the previous appeal committee, we tried to create a group that can look at this as objectively as possible. We all bring some bias to the table no matter what our position or who we hold, but as objective as possible and let the decision of the committee stand from that angle. So that you have a review, a hearing. So really any issue in this handbook that they feel is that they were disciplined and didn't feel that was a just, there's a process for them to unjust, if you will, that appeal. So the page that I'm referencing is page 16 that had the previous review committee.
That's the final section in the handbook, absent the attachments at the end for parents.
The only attachment that's not in your packet is the concussion awareness form, which that's the one the MHSA publishes, so we insert that there, as well as the physical form. So it's whatever the form is at that time. And then the eligibility form, everything referenced in the handbook is an attachment. The release form that's in there, it's all as an attachment.
Thank you.
Thank you. And once again, I want to thank Dr. David Mylart and Mr. Walmsley. Our sessions were very sincere. A great deal amount of time and sincere dialogue went into this proposal to you tonight and the first reading. I was honored to be a part of it and look forward to next time we get to review it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's a sample resolution for the first reading.
There'll be a second. We've all been logged out.
Yeah.
We timed out.
I motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent and accept the attached student athlete code of conduct handbook as the first reading.
Support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
Yeah, thanks for putting work on it.
Okay. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Next, excuse me, organizational chart. Brian?
Thank you. In your board packet, and I'm going to try to put this up on the screen so it's visible. I apologize if it's not. At our workshop and at the finance meeting and through communication to the board, we talked about where I see the district needs to move to that next level. I think one of the challenges education faces is the style in which we operate today has to be different than the style in which we operated 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The nature of education today and the choices that parents have available to them and the regulations that the state has put upon us is it's exponentially grown over the last several years. So I'm going to show you two organizational charts. One of them is where the long-range plan that I would like to get the organization to from an organizational perspective. You'll see in the chart, in the blue represents the instructional division. The green represents the non-instructional and support staff division. So starting from the left side over, again, this is long-term. I don't think this is going to happen, you know, with the way the state passes regulations for the school funding and the laws, as Mrs. Bartels mentioned earlier. I don't know when this will be, but this is where I want to move to. One of the things is a position of Director of Operations. As a facility manager, one of the things that we have to do as an organization is to make sure our facilities are a top-notch facility. Parents have choices right now where they can go, and if our facilities from the look, the infrastructure, the maintenance is not to the level of their expectation, our customer, then they have options to go to. And I think we need to move to the position of we have someone who is proactively rather than reactive to the needs of our organization, from things that need numerous fixing to preventative maintenance, from sidewalks that have cracks in them to doors that are beginning rusting and that we need to eventually look at replacing, to you know, just as your own home, you would paint a room and eventually it's got to be repainted just to maintain that cosmetic appearance to the community. Under that Director of Operations would be a transportation coordinator and dispatch with the bus drivers, mechanics, and our maintenance. You also have under there, this person would be responsible for any custodial, grounds and snow removal contracts,
and then our nutrition services department, which includes our cooks and assistant cooks. On the far right side in green, you'll see the administrative assistant. You'll see the second, which is actually 6B, with that box on there, represents a community liaison and a centralized registration perspective. When parents come into the district, we have one chance to give a very good first impression. And a lot of times parents come in over the summer, and one of the things that my vision is that we have a welcome center. This welcome center not only registers families and gets everything completed so that when they get to the school, they're literally just getting their schedule and getting the tour and they're ready to go. But it also provides them access to get them online for PowerSchool, answer questions that they may have, make sure their logins work, looks at resources that they may have if they're a family that's in need, community outreach resources such as CARE, various local organizations that we have. And then underneath that you have the network technician, our business manager, accounts payable, and accounts receivable. In this plan you have the Director of Student Support Services, which is 2A, which is a vision of mine that any support services that students need, and our population is changing, our demographics are changing, as with every district. The societal needs that students bring to us, they bring us a lot of things that probably when we went to school we didn't have to worry about, that our kids come to us every day, and those issues that if they're not addressed and with some type of support system are going to impact the instruction in the classroom. The high school principal, middle school principal, and the elementary principal at the top, one of my visions is to create them, those positions to be also curriculum leaders in the building. My goal is as we finalize these plans to look at what duties do these current positions as just principals hold that we could remove and get them focused, and not that they aren't, but really put their energy into focusing on the instructional end, working with teachers in the classroom, instructional practices, all the managerial stuff in the organization that takes them away from that instruction. Looking at the dark blue sections, you'll see a high school dean of students, middle school dean of students, and an elementary dean of students, and each one of those having a director of student activities and athletics in their division, with the elementary dean of students overseeing the early childhood center and program. The light blue boxes represents the clerical support that would support those positions. And again, you see, based on the board's direction, you'll see the elementary counselor, which I think is going to be a tremendous asset to this organization, as well as a motivator from a selling point to the district of families that are looking for support system, that we recognize that the elementary kids need that support system. So this is that long range that I shared with you in the October workshop and through many conversations and discussion. To get to this, I recognize as an organization we need an interim plan. And so some of this is not necessarily feasible at this time for a variety of reasons. Organizationally, we may not be ready for that, or financially, with everything, there's a cost. In your backup, I presented a preliminary cost analysis that, as we talked about at the Finance Committee, on what we think this is. You know, when you add an elementary counselor, there's a cost to the district. You'll see some of the boxes that are dotted. Those are interim positions depending on the positions that in the organization they hold. For instance, the Director of Operations, I know fiscally we aren't in a position to put that position in place at this point. But how do we position ourselves long term to, if we're looking at the facilities when the bond is over and we've made these major improvements, how do we maintain and keep them going? You'll see in this plan, and there's, I'm trying to find, I don't have the, you'll have the Director of Student Services. Basically all support services would fall under this one. Currently, we have a .6 Director of Special Education, where the position that she holds is primarily special education, though we have been fortunate with the expertise that she brings to look at multiple aspects. But the need in our district is grown to a point where if we're going to talk about starting with students in mind and providing, and I'm not saying that the board didn't do this in the past, but if we want to start with, here's our student, and start with that, what do we need for that student? Support services fall within that realm. And I'm not just talking about special education. I'm talking about students that have health plans. How do we coordinate those services K-12? Right now we have 3 buildings, an elementary, middle, and high school, that in some fashion do things a little differently, though they do a lot of conversation and talk to each other. The implementation of plans, I know Mr. Bordeaux is the 504 guru from the high school perspective, and he has a lot of wealth of knowledge. What we want to make sure is that process is consistent, so we provide as many support networks for our students as possible. You'll see in this plan is again, the high school principal / director of curriculum for that instructional grade range, the middle school for that grade range, and elementary. Taking the dean of students at each of the levels, you'll see those in the makeup too. So in essence, the plan here is depending on who holds the position and the certifications they have, and I want to create this as flexible and as fluid as possible, because we don't know day to day who's where in the organization. I mean, God forbid one of them wins the lottery and says, tomorrow, Brian, I'm out of here, I'm done. You know, I got to be able to react as an organization and be able to respond. And so I'm trying, as I built this, my frame of reference was taking out all names of people and building, okay, based on my 90 days and where as a state in Michigan in education, that the expectation for that building leader is they're expected to be true instructional leaders. With the state now, you know, coming down with this teacher evaluation, how does a leader in that building, and when you just think about the magnitude of that alone, that mandate, and I'll use Ms. Vachon, for example, you have 28 staff members, and to be expected to go into staff members' rooms and evaluate them effectively on whatever state system is going to be imposed on us. Right now we have a very good system, I feel, that provides opportunity for growth for staff members to identify areas. But that alone, if I'm 28 staff members and really going in and creating you know, snapshots, you know, there's 30 minutes roughly a staff member. By the time you go in there, you take that snapshot, write your documentation, get it out there, and you multiply 30 minutes times 28 staff members, and you do that multiple times during the year, something needs to come off that administrator's plate if we want them to be that effective. We want them to have the conversation with staff saying, have you thought about trying to teach it from this angle, or bringing that depth of understanding for what students are engaged in to a higher level. The assessment that our students, and part of the premise for this redesign was looking at where we are expected, where our students are expected to perform on assessments. And it's multi-step, multi-tiered, very high-level, in-depth knowledge. For the viewing public out there, there's our new state assessment coming this spring is called MyStep, the Michigan Student Testing Educational Program, and it's replacing the MEP and MME. But the level of rigor that our students are going to be expected to demonstrate, whether it's on the state test or on our own internal, is at a level where they should be to be able to be competitive in the 21st century. How as an organization do we allow the key members in our organization to focus on that rather than facility use and budget and management and so forth, when really what we all went into teaching was about how do we make the environment better for kids. So some of the duties that the restructure is moving to centralized ordering systems and management of our fiscal budgets, so that we are not necessarily having 3, 4 different, depending on the groups, you know, from an ordering stuff that we know we order every year. So that angle at the top. At the bottom in the red, or excuse me, on the yellow, and it's hard to see for the viewing audience out there, is the director or dean of students at the high school who would oversee all the student activities and athletic programs at that level, rather than our current model, which is technically K-12. Each level has its own nuances and uniquenesses that need to be addressed. the Dean of Students at the middle school, as well as the Student Activities Director at the middle school. At the elementary level, you'll see the Dean of Students for elementary, which also includes the Student Activities / Early Childhood. My goal is to grow that early childhood program. The value of having kids come into our district with a strong early childhood program, you can't measure that for the impact that it's going to have long term. And so we need to begin developing that. And instructionally, we need to have a leader who knows the needs of that program and understands that program and where we need to grow it from a facility use. And so as I began developing this organizational chart, there were pieces in here that naturally fit. And for instance, if I'm a Dean of Students and part of my role is dealing with discipline, it would make sense that the counselors or support system that could be on a proactive work hand in hand with that Dean of Students. It would also make sense that in this case the athletics, the coaches or the directors report to that person. If I'm looking at the elementary realm, you'll see a whole quadrant there of early childhood, which encompasses not only the current director, but also before and after school child care, the preschool programs. Currently we have a 4-year-old that's 5 days a week and a 3-day-a-week program, and a 3-year-old program that's 3 days a week. My goal is to grow those so that those classrooms have kids in them every day. And if we can get families that are loving our early childhood program, even if they are not district residents, if they feel comfortable in our program and successful, the odds that they're going to remain there are strong with us, that they're going to remain our students. And that's what we want. We want committed families. So in this structure, it's not much different than the long-term vision that I showed on the previous screen, with the exception of that director of operations. You'll see on this one, you'll see a director of school improvement. There are, the need for this is, I feel, as we look at transitioning, there are a lot of state requirements and direction that, as an organization, they're changing minute by minute. You know, for instance, you know, several of us were heard that, you know, they're not going to put any of the focus school or priority school consequences with this new state assessment. Well, just today, the state superintendent came out and said, well, hang on a minute, I got to get this first cleared by the U.S. Department of Education. So what we thought was happening has now shifted, you know, 180 degrees in 24 hours. So having someone understand that bigger philosophy, where I see this director of student improvement is really coordinating the activities from the instructional end, both what the content we're teaching and the instructional expectation in the classroom, with our 3 building leaders at the principal and / curriculum directors at the building. Really the 4, if you think of it, almost flows into, I know it's somewhat linear in this package, but realistically it almost flows into more of a pyramid shape, because you need someone that's going to tie the thread in of all the schools together and be able to coordinate what we're doing in elementary. We're doing this because when they get to high school, this is the expectation we want students to leave with. If you remember, one of the first things I asked the board, I think it's back in July when I started, and I asked the administrators on my very first meeting is, what do you expect? What's the profile of a Richmond learner? What do we expect for kids in Richmond, students in Richmond, to leave us with? And when you look at that chart, and I shared with you at that chart on the workshop on the in October, very few of it was about content. Very little of it was about, you know, I want the student to be able to memorize a quadratic formula. It was about the quality of student that we wanted, the character of the student that we wanted, that we wanted problem solvers, thinkers, and so forth. To get us there, the instructional activities that are happening in the classroom have to be high level. When you look at Bloom's taxonomy, they have to be at that high level. If we're staying, and we have a, you know, I can honestly say this from my experience in my previous district. I've never met an entire organization that knows each student for who they are as a student. They're not looked at as a number. And one of the things that I'm walking a fine line is I don't want to lose that. But the pressures that we're coming with in terms of from a compliance
is what's frustrating many staff members to feel overwhelmed and feel like they've got to do things for compliance, and we start losing touch with why we're in the business and worrying about students. And the staff member here, I think they're willing to try anything. You know, I can walk into any classroom in this district and share ideas with them, they share ideas with me, and you'll see good things happen. We just need to coordinate those efforts systemically. So we're talking about a math adoption, and one of the things that I proposed to you in my 90-day plan, when we're looking at a math adoption, we don't need to be looking at it elementary. It needs to be a K-12 perspective. How does it all flow together so that when they're leaving 4th grade, there's a set of expectations that our students have accomplished at a certain level that allows them to get into success in the middle school, and same with the high school. But I'll go back to that support network. We have students in our district that either have come to us lacking certain essential skills, and that's where that whole realm of the Director of Student Support Services and that division of the organization needs to focus. What do we do? If we're looking at MTSS, multi-tiered assistance and support, what are we doing for that child who's not making it? But I'll challenge the organization on the other end. Too often I've had conversations with parents that have been here is they don't feel that their child is being challenged. And we have students that are performing at a high end. And so in the classroom, how do we manage that? And we think of an average teacher in that classroom who has, you know, I'll just say 30 students for the sake of argument. You know, there's about 30% that are considered in the state's bottom 30%. They're the at-risk. We have gifted and talented students in this district. We have academically, the kids who can display their knowledge in a format that's not the traditional paper pencil. That's where we need to get our staff members to really think how they're planning their classroom. And I challenge any staff member that if they were to really think about what is the curriculum that they teach, and if any of them says their first instinct is the book, we've got a long way to go. Because the curriculum that we teach, we decide as a board. The state gives us those standards and expectations. We decide how we want to teach it as an organization. And as an organization, we have to set, these are the expectations by grade level that we're expecting all students to achieve. And when they're not achieving, what's our plan to achieve them? That's the premise of professional learning communities. And I don't know the official date that Richmond Community Schools adopted professional learning communities, but I can tell you there's 4 basic questions in the beginning phase. What do we want kids to learn? But that should be clearly articulated that every staff member needs to know, this is what all my 2nd graders or my 10th graders need to know. How are we going to know that they know it? How are we going to assess them in an appropriate manner that says they got it? And if they got it, we don't need to reteach it. They got it. Let's go on. And then the 3rd question is, okay, what do we do when they don't have it? What's our support now? What's our multi-tiered system of support? And then, excuse me, our final question is, okay, what do we do with those students that have already got it? And how are we going to move them beyond? So the organization, what I'm asking for tonight is to begin the conversation with our specific groups that are affected by this change over our current model, and to begin the conversation to look at what does that duty of the, and I'll just use the Director of Student Support Service, what does that entail? Let's sit down and have a conversation. But one thing I'm going to request in all groups is let's look at what has been our frustrations and that we felt our hands have been tied as an organization, and how do we untie it? Because one of the benefits of this organization is it's small enough that we decide whether we want to, all of our successes, and when we have things that aren't working, we have the option of changing. There's very little bureaucracy that can be put in our way to get to that change. But we just got to figure out what is that, make sure we're all on the same page from an organizational perspective. I don't think you'll find anybody in the organization, at least I haven't, and if there is someone, I'd love to talk to him or her, that says the students that we're teaching now have very different, and I'm going to use the term baggage that they're bringing to the classroom than they may have had 5, 10 years ago. And the challenges as an instructional person, whether I'm a teacher, or whether I'm a support staff, or whether I'm a principal, is how do we address that baggage to get them into a learning environment where they feel safe, secure, and ready to learn. Because their mindset is not that I'm here and there's people in this organization that care about me and want the best for me, they're not going to learn. That's basic human anatomy, fight or flight, with that perspective. And we have the staff in this organization that are ready and willing and have been to step up and meet those challenges. So what I'm asking you tonight is to give me the permission to begin conversations with several of the units in the organization, because you'll see some, this centralized registration, this welcome center idea is going to require some conversation. It's going to require rethinking positions and roles and looking at logistics of how we operate. And it may be looking at how we operate to become more efficient to save us money from a duplication of effort. And I don't mean by any means that to name blame on anybody, because I don't find anybody who's not working, their tail off in this organization. They want the best for the kids here. It's let's rethink, how are we going to, as an organization, survive and I mean survive from a long-term perspective, the choice that parents have. I shared with you each a book at the beginning of the year, and I gave my administrative team this book that talked about public education and customer service. We have one chance to set a very good impression for anybody who's coming into our organization, who's choosing Richmond Community Schools. And that has to be an awesome impression. Because if they truly believe, and I mean this not just by a surface level, because my expectation is that the staff live and breathe this, but they truly believe that we're here for their child, then they are partners for the next 13, 14 years for their child. When we talked about the athletic handbook, I think, at least my conversation from my previous history, working with the athletic handbook, the conversation was very different in that meeting. It was about looking at student athletes and looking at focusing on the student. My conversation with each of the bargaining groups to have this conversation is let's focus on our students. What do we know and recognize are the needs of our students? I call them our customers all the time. Our families, our students who at any point can say, I'm not satisfied, I'm going somewhere else. I hope under my tenure that never happened. So for you, there's a recommendation to begin the conversation with this. And I will entertain any questions if anybody has.
Okay, there's a sample motion.
I motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent and authorize him to begin discussions and negotiations with appropriate bargaining units of the revised organization chart effective 1 July 2015 as presented in the attached documentation.
Support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd just say, Brian, I appreciate the intestinal fortitude and courage to relook the organization, and we can't sit and wait. So I think I applaud you for coming, looking at the school, and looking at how we could reorganize. It's forward-looking, reorganize the organization to meet the challenges of facing us as an educational institution. So we can't be reactionary. So I appreciate your efforts in pulling this together. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that visionary work that has gone into this is imperative, just imperative. So thank you for your work and for meeting us.
How do you anticipate talks going?
I in my preliminary talks with several of the bargaining units, I would characterize it, and if I'm misrepresenting, I hope that someone would speak up, in terms of they're open to it. They want to know more details. What are the details of it in terms of the logistics? There are going to be issues that are going to come up that with any time to change that, you're not going to get 100% of all the details worked out, but I think the commitment to, my administrative team, the teachers that are involved, and the clerical that I've had to work with, the food service, the transportation, every group, the paraprofessionals, the secretaries, etc. every group is understanding we as an organization need to make decisions for our long-term survival. And how do we do it? Because we are a people organization. And how do you do that respecting what people have brought to the organization and their strengths? And I'll give the example is when I became an elementary principal, the gentleman who was before me was a phenomenal PR person. However, he had no instructional background. That type of principal, and I'm not saying our principal is there, but that type of principal at the time cannot survive in today's day and age. And to think about what the expectation is on a building principal to be able to be the doer of everything, it's impossible. I mean, the amount of hours that it would take, you might as well put a Murphy bed in their office and have it pulled down and let them sleep overnight. And not that they don't, I don't know if any of them have done it, but it's just impossible. So I got to figure out as an organization, that's been my mantra coming in, is how do I take what I see as observations and how we can become better efficient. Do I think they're going to be supportive? I think because subsidies, they're supportive, there's a lot of details that need to be talked and discussed out. And like I said, my preliminary conversations, they have been open. They've asked a lot of questions. There's been, depending on the groups, some reservations. You know, the other book that I gave you is Change is Good, You Go First, and which change isn't bad. And if we sit together and say, okay, as an organization, how do we want to survive? How do we want to make sure we're putting kids first in all of our decisions we're making, from staffing to everything we're doing focuses on students. I don't think anybody can disagree with that then. It's just working out those logistics. So I'm very optimistic.
It sounds like you've been pretty open too, as far as.
I have, I won't deny I've been somewhat strategic in how information is getting out there, because what I don't want is rumor mills festering and working against us. And I have been very open and honest with every bargaining group, especially the ones that we're currently negotiating with. I don't have any problem sharing anything I shared with them, any discussion, any proposal. It's about being as transparent as possible. The challenge we have as an organization, and what's my number one priority, is preventing miscommunication, and how do I keep that lines of communication open while respecting the process it has to go through to get to that point. And I would just hope that as people hear rumors or ideas, they funnel them through the leadership channels that we have so we can work through that process.
I do have a question. I'm looking at the top row, and you said about the principals and then the director of school improvement, they're all on the same level. Now, in my school district, the director of curriculum is kind of above the principals, just to kind of facilitate what needs to be done so they have that kind of authority. Are you looking at this working together this way, or are you looking at it as a position that could be changed somehow?
I think this model has to be allowed to be fluid from the perspective of, if it's changing other than what's up here, I'm coming back to you and say, okay, this is how it needs to change. But part of that conversation, needs to happen with the team that we have in place and the supports network. And I say that for this reason, is there's going to be issues that the director of school improvement, in this case, there's not an option. We have to do it.
Right.
And it's going to be somewhat directional or somewhat authoritarian, if you will. And I don't mean to be in a negative fashion, but it is a directive that we don't have an option.
Yeah.
Right, that we've got to operate. And one of the clearest things is school improvement plans. You know, we don't have an option whether we don't have an option what format they're going in. The state dictates that. However, what we need to make sure is the thread that goes between them. So if we're focusing on reading as our strategy, that how is what is being done at the elementary school going to support and build upon what's happening in the middle school and then eventually in high school. And I'll give you the example. We have a strong positive, or I would think a very strong beginning stage of positive before it's the system at the middle school level. You at the health wellness committee that happened earlier in the week, or excuse me, at the end of last week. Excuse me. There was a student here who could speak to it like
he's been living this for years, and it's their first full year of implementation. I'm looking for, it's about full year. You've got, you know, the high school now getting on board to bring that. The elementary has launched it in their plan, and they started the process this year. Are they there where they? No, but that's one example that if that's a system that addresses the support networks for kids and how do we address behaviors that are preventing us from learning in the classroom. So having someone be able to, and I keep using the thread that ties them all together, if you don't have it, then we're going to be a system of schools rather than a school system.
Right. No, I really...
So I think I just need the flexibility that is somewhat fluid, because as we evolve and go through the details, it may evolve to that. But I need to sit down and I need to, with the stakeholders that we're involving here, and really have the conversation about, it's almost like if we could start from scratch, in this day and age, how would we build the organization? Rather than react to the organization over what's been pushed onto us.
No, with this model, I really truly see our district moving forward and getting to where we finally need to be. And I really commend you for doing this, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen, what the outcome is. So thank you very much.
I guess the last question, timeline. What are you looking at timeline?
I want to begin the conversation with each of the groups that are directly affected, at least have initial conversations before the holiday break, meaning the Christmas holiday break. Part of what I want to do is, if you will, go on a road tour to the whole organization and talk to them about, as an organization, where do you see the needs and the focus that we need to put our energy and priorities. I can tell you, if you go into a high school classroom, you can pick any classroom, there's a teacher there who's given it 120%, but yet they're still struggling because there's a support system that they can't address all kids for some reason. There's maybe a day or two, and they're frustrated as that they're professional. And how do we support them so we can get that frustration out of their dialogue so that they really see the good that they're doing? So from my angle, I'm hoping to begin this conversation with each of the groups before the holiday break, shortly after the first of the year, begin starting to finalize things, so as we begin looking at the budgetary process for next year, we're building this into the budget. And my goal is that this is implemented beginning July 1st as an organization.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, it's been moved and supported. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Brian. Next, auditorium lights.
I asked Mr. Pearson to join us from Hendrick Construction to talk about the auditorium lights that are in the bond package. In the backup that I provided you, as well as in the newsletter I provided you, the materials that were in Shore Views, which is the electrician that we contracted with back in the spring, were not in the bond bid that went out. The labor was, but not the materials. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pearson from Hendrick Construction to talk about the issue at hand here, as well as the recommendation that we're asking for the board.
Yeah, we were trying to get some lighting, and I seem to think there was some confusion the day we had the low bidder picked out. We had him come in to do our post-bid information. When we did that, one of his first comments was, I don't have the lighting for the auditorium. Of course, my thought right away was then, well, then you're non-responsive and we can't use you. However, he said, well, I'll tell you why, because no one has that. It's a brand new product, but no one at that point offered it. And no one even had a price for it. So we talked a little about that, and then the electrical engineer from French Associates was there, and I questioned him and asked if that's correct, and he said, yeah, that is correct. At that point, we had a couple of things we could do. There was two bidders, him and the next bidder. They had done a walkthrough with the engineer earlier when it was offered. The other two bidders were about $100,000 higher because they didn't go through a walkthrough, and I don't know where they got their numbers. So we decided after talking, Dr. Olson was there, Vicki was there, myself, and it ended up being the logical thing to accept his bid as it was, and then let him try to figure out where do we find these light fixtures. And that's what we did. He did find the light fixtures, and then it took us probably another month to try to find another light fixture. We knew some other company was going to have them. We did that, and that saved us $30,000. And so what we're asking for today is you approving that $44,804.82 to take care of the lighting.
Just to fill in the board, the original cost proposal that Mr. Pearson speaks of is regarding, it was about $78,000 cost for a specific kind of light. When we went back to look for what are our options for light, we found a different light fixture, which is in the packet that you received tonight, and I was able to get some of it uploaded over the weekend for you to review if you had a chance to, but otherwise in the packet tonight. What we're talking about is the actual lights on the map here in the stage here, or in the auditorium, where the actual people sit. I was there yesterday for the Community Baptist service at 10:30, and there was 14 lights that are out. And the problem has been in this facility, as many of you know, that as soon as we change the light bulb, within a short time frame, the light bulb is burned out again. The product or the light is not. So that's the $44,000 that's in your packet is for the light fixture that's in the backup of your material. So, right.
Okay, so when the bid was done, there weren't any lights to be bid. That's what you're saying? Nobody made the lights?
There was no light fixtures.
No light fixtures to be found?
Right. Well, let me take it back a little bit. He had heard that there was something out at that stage, but nobody offered it. If you read his thing, there was nobody that offered it. There was nowhere to get a light yet at that stage, so he couldn't do it.
So what I want to correct is in the backup, I listed that they didn't make this light with the thought, as I was learning about this problem, that the light, I guess, was out of production. It was too new of a light for people to purchase at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I apologize for that.
Yeah, you just couldn't even get a price on it.
The letter in the very back, the last page of your document, is from Shoreview. I received that today from Shoreview that Mr. Pearson had brought to my attention, explaining the process or what's happening.
Well,
So the bid was accepted without them having everything in it.
right.
The bid was accepted without them having everything into their bid?
Yes, it was. Well, yes, after discussion, because what we did is there was nothing to put in.
So it's kind of isn't it kind of the same thing that we had an issue, or I had an issue with the track and the limestone? They say so, I mean, these people were technically allowed to go back and add the lighting in. When the bidder for the limestone was, or
I wouldn't think I'd call that the same, but I'm not sure. This is something where it just literally didn't exist, so.
Well, which fixture was in the bid package? Is it the Rambush fixture? Is it the...
It was what no longer existed.
What no longer existed? I thought these were two new.
You asked what was in the bid package, so.
What was in the bid package?
The fixture that was in there, you just couldn't get it.
Because the next higher bidder was $74,000 or $72,000 higher, and if we actually spec'd out the ambush fixture, we're spending more money now.
The next bidder was
$72,000 higher.
Yeah.
The bidder was Metro at $481,000 in the backup, and Shoreview came in at $409,000. So
Yeah.
But he had a placeholder in there for the materials.
Yes.
All material you couldn't get.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. All of them knew that what was in the lights that were in the original specifications when the bids went out, you couldn't get those lights. Some chose to just bid the labor with no materials.
Yes.
And some chose to put a placeholder, realizing at some point we're gonna have to make a decision on the lights. And that placeholder may be enough, it may be too little, it may be too much. And is it correct in phrasing it that way?
Well, that's about what it is, yes.
So what I wanted to make sure the board had was, back in May, there was a conversation, and I guess a sign-off, recognizing that the bid for Shoreview did not contain the materials, and that we'd have to, at some point, bring this to light.
Yes, that's correct.
And I guess I just have to ask the question as to why the board wasn't told that when we approved that. I mean, does anybody else remember being told that that was the situation when we approved it originally?
No, and to further, I just don't understand how we got to this point and never was brought up again. I mean, who was managing when the new light fixture or the alternative light fixture was going to be available instead of waiting?
Well, at that time that went on, Dr. Olson agreed with that and signed it, so.
Agreed that's, well, who was responsible to figure out the new light fixture? And when was that gonna occur? It's kind of late in the game now to be bringing it up.
Yeah, that part I don't know. We just wanted them to, the electrical engineer wanted them to check to see if there was a cheaper fixture out now at this point, so that's all I know.
Well, yeah, but
but
aren't you responsible? Yeah. Aren't you the guy running the show?
For what?
For the bond project.
Well, no, but I'm missing what you're saying to me.
Manager?
I don't know what you're asking me.
Who's the program manager overseeing everything?
But I don't understand I don't know what you're asking me to say, though.
Okay, if Dr. Olson, there was a meeting and there was an agreement that we would accept the proposal as is.
Yes.
But we don't know what light fixture we're going to use in the future. Who had the rose pinned on them to figure out what light fixture we're going to do?
The electrical engineer. I'm not an electrical engineer. I wouldn't know.
Okay, the electrical engineer from French's, our architect we hired?
Yes.
So not necessarily Shoreview.
Oh, no, not sure.
Specs that whether it was the univents or whether it was the lighting came from French's in terms of those specs. So recognizing that we didn't have the right light fixture in the spec, I would say be the electrical engineer from French's.
I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, really, the answer is nobody.
Who was monitoring to find out, like, okay, we'll review this?
Who didn't do their job?
And
nobody did their job.
In August to find out what light we can find out.
December almost.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Nobody's done their job.
Somebody's got to be responsible for overseeing and figure out who's holding the electrical engineer accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody.
Do you have an answer for that?
No, I don't have an answer for that. No.
Nobody. Not the construction manager, not the architect, nobody. Just, hey, we need $44,000 more to get some lights so we don't keep burning out lights in the auditorium so we can have a concert. And there's lights for the concert. It's ridiculous.
It just is.
When was the work done in the auditorium? What month?
The lighting.
When was the work done?
The
What
work
month?
in the auditorium has not begun from the lighting aspect. The security camera and the roof patch.
So Shoreview hasn't done anything yet?
In the auditorium for lighting, The only thing they've done if there was needed for anything with the security cameras. But there's been no, in the auditorium itself, no work has been done by Shoreview.
So when they did the bid all those months ago.
Correct.
Now, all these months later, we're gonna decide we're gonna do it, and we need another $44,000.
The 44,000 is for the materials.
Correct.
The bid has in it already built in that original 409, and forgive me if I'm not using the right number, the labor that it entails. So as an organization, I see we have two paths we could go down. One is we could approve the materials and have Shoreview finish the contract. The other path is we let the bid projects finish. At some point, we have I'm going to call it a credit, I don't know if I'm using the right terms, for the labor, come back to us from Shoreview, and then we rebid the auditorium light package out. If we do that, there is, I don't have a crystal ball, but there's a risk that whoever's bidding on it is bidding on a project that has a much smaller scale of scope. So the price for labor may be more because it's a smaller, and Shoreview knew the magnitude of labor that they had with all the bond projects. So I mean, it's.
And so we're to believe that just now all of a sudden these lights became found, that all of a sudden the lights are now available to find that they're available for $44,000 from May till now. All of a sudden Shoreview found them, but they weren't available in May?
Yes.
When they were doing their bid, all of a sudden now they're available?
Well, they didn't just find them, but they found them a while ago.
Oh, when was a while ago?
Probably, I don't know the exact date. But they
That's
found
why
it.
I don't know how, I guess my question, how you let people bid on something, because you are right, Dan, that was the question, that was the whole thing we had before. How you let someone bid on something when the whole aspect of what they're bidding on wasn't available to be bid on.
Well, that's why it created a problem that day.
Well, yeah, and you didn't let the guy from before with the track stuff, that was the whole thing. We didn't let them start all over.
So I guess, Brian, from my perspective, I'm trying to think, okay, in contract terms, is there any way that we get consideration because somehow some ball was dropped here that
somebody's not doing their job.
Well, we don't get consideration because Linda signed that it was okay.
Well,
first off,
Linda doesn't know what
it doesn't matter. She signed on behalf of the district.
Consideration on an error on somebody's part, whether it's the architect in the design giving the specs out.
Well, I mean, the bottom line, as a program manager, I would say, who had the program plan that this is going to be done at a certain time? Obviously, it's not going to get done because no one was even looking at this till now. We're bringing it up that, hey, we need to pay more money for lights. I
don't, and again, I don't, if you're taking that, I'm pointing fingers, I guess that's it, but one of the things that I'm used to working with is if you've got a list of projects that you're doing, kind of outlining when, then.
Yeah, there's a timeline.
I don't know if that existed as an organization.
I mean, I guess we don't need to do the postmortem right now on this, but what I don't want to do is cost the district more money by sitting in and not making the decision, so.
Or more time.
Because the time frame is if you approve the decision tonight, it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get the actual light fixtures in, so we're talking after the first of the year. Shoreview's their scope of their work. Outside of the addition, I don't think they have anything that's left on their bond. And again, I'll have to double check, but there's nothing major left, so this would become a priority for them to install.
Oh, will it? Is that written somewhere?
In my experience with there's two vendors that I feel from my tenure here who have worked tremendously with us and prioritized when we've had to reprioritize things. Shoreview is one of them,
they have been accommodating to our needs. When we've had issues with lights and so forth, I sat down with them, they said, okay, let's figure out how do I pull manpower hours together. Can I commit to that? Based on the past experience for the last 5 months working with them, I feel pretty confident that they would be able to do this as their first, as soon as the fixtures get in. Right now, they are putting temporary lighting in there for just replacing bulbs so that our concerts that happen in December, there's lighting. I mean, like I said, yesterday I was in there for the community Baptist service, and it was dark.
We could see change orders for that. Does that work?
The change order, this should not be a change order if we're approving it tonight.
For putting temporary lighting in, we can see change orders for that.
Do you remember the 388 lights that were out in the district?
Right.
That was part of that 388. We did have to buy the light bulbs, and I don't know off the top of my head, but there was, I think there's 12 light bulbs that they put in of the 14. The two back ones back here. Where's the stage? This is the stage here? No, this is the stage up here. The two lights in the back here are the ones that we opted, don't put the money in when we're going to just replace them, but work on this area, which is primarily dark.
Well, at this point, I can go ahead and make the motion to move forward, but Brian, someone needs to do the postmortem on this, and in the lessons learned going forward, someone needs to be held accountable when something silliness is going on here. But with that said, I guess I motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent to increase the contract at Shoreview Electric for the purchase of auditorium lighting in the amount of $44,804.82 for a grand total of $456,004.82 plus previously approved change orders for which funding from the 2013 voter-approved bond is authorized as presented in the attached documentation.
Rob, was that you?
Yep.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any other discussion?
I guess I just have one thing to say. You do understand that this is really, makes us look kind of bad because we weren't told this originally. And so I just say to whoever it was that was involved in that decision-making process, that doesn't feel good for any one of us sitting here. And it makes us feel as though this really important work has somehow had some untrustworthy stuff involved in it. And that doesn't make us feel good at all, when it took us a lot of effort to get the community to support this.
In the first
so
place.
I'm looking at you, and I don't know that it's only you that I need to be looking at, but I'm just saying that in general, I want to have all good feelings about this great moving forward stuff that has been happening when it comes to this bond. And so having something like this happen, wow, it's a wow. That's all I have to say.
Is there a way to find out, I mean, who is accountable for that? Who is supposed to be? I mean, are you guys at any part of it accountable, or is it all on the architect? I mean, because there's a lot of, seems like every week in the newsletter there's something else, whether it's like, the wrong concrete for the addition. I mean.
Well, what do we hire a construction manager for then?
I mean, one would assume, I mean, I assumed that we hired people that knew what the hell they were doing. Apparently not.
Okay, I'm going to do a roll call. Andy?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Bridget?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries.
I will commit to the board to have a conversation with Mr. Pearson, with Rich from Shoreview, to make sure that it is a very clear timeline for this implementation for the board. Because this is, for our performing arts program, this is critical. So I do appreciate your support to get this moving, and we will work on that.
Okay, thank you. Brian, next, 11, civil rights.
We had the distinct pleasure of having the Office of Civil Rights visit us, and I say that in a positive light because
Just to give you a little background, in Michigan, the Office of Civil Rights guidelines for making sure we're in compliance with various things from handicap signs to, as I mentioned earlier, the height of our paper towel, toilet dispensers, etc., falls under, in Michigan, career and technical education. So when we received this notification last, help me out, May, that we would be getting a visit, and our visit was in October, that we really were confused and perplexed because the stuff they were asking us didn't fit into career and technical education. And so once we had the visit, and it was I feel it was a good team. They gave us a lot of positive feedbacks and acknowledged some of the things that we're doing well, as well as some of the things that we need to correct. And they spent a day in our facility. They traveled to many of our buildings. They brought out rulers and manuals and so forth. So before you is the actual report we received from the Office of Civil Rights, Michigan Department of Education. And I just want to point out a couple things because we have to put a plan in place by next February 5th of how we're going to correct certain things that they've identified that has to be corrected. We don't have a choice. Or there's also things that as we're going forward and making changes, we need to correct at that time. So for instance, in your packet on page 205, you'll notice some bold lettering and some asterisks that say that these are things that have to be corrected. So the first correctable item that we have is on page 4. And it talks about non-discrimination policy for Title 6, Title 9, 504, and Title 2. We need to have guidelines that are communicated that advise students and parents that, first of all, that they will not be discriminated. So what that means is in programs and booklets that we publish, in postings that you see online, in communication to the public, that there is a statement, a non-discrimination statement, and actually on your agenda, we started that process at the bottom, the non-discrimination statement, that needs to be out there. So systemically, we have to put that. And that we're not going to discriminate on the gauge of race, color, national origin, sex, disability, etc. This is, to me, one of the easiest and quickest fixes that we can make. On page 5, it continues talking about how we're going to disseminate this information on an annual and regular basis. For instance, student handbooks have this information. If we have a parent guardian handbook, employee handbook, course catalog booklets that we put public, newsletters, memorandums, all that stuff has to have these non-discrimination statements. That's an easy one. It doesn't cost any funds to fix. On page 6 is the other corrective action, which deals with Title 9, Section 504, and Title 3, that there are procedures must be disseminated to students and personnel, talking about the grievance process. And I talked a little bit about this when we talked about the athletic handbook, that there is a grievance process that if you feel that you have been discriminated against, what do you have to do? What do you do? This will probably come to you in a form of a board policy and reflective in administrative guidelines to make sure we're in compliance. Again, this is an easy fix in my eyes that we can correct. Systemically as an organization, we're going to have to, just for you know, Title 6 in the federal law is referred to the discrimination on race, color, national origin, etc. As you keep going through on page, you'll see several instances that we had no violations, which is good. On page 11 is the corrective action, and this is the one that we're going to have serious conversation regarding. It's regarding the varsity locker room. They toured our facilities and felt that the varsity locker room that we have at the high school is not comparable in scope to what we offer the girls' locker room. And there is a section in the girls' varsity locker room off the gym that has a portion that has been, I'm going to call it remodeled, kind of upgrade, but the two are not proportionally representative. So they feel that the female athletes or that utilize that locker room have less of facilities than the male athletes. So this is the one that as a group that we're going to need to look at and how we operate and what our action plan is to do this. And it's not that we have to have the action plan done by the 5th, we have to submit it by the 5th of what we're going to do. And then there is a date in here, and off the top of my head, I don't remember the date. I think it's in December of next year, 15, that we actually have to have it finished. So this potentially could be an expense depending on how we go, and so forth. The next step on page 12 is a corrective action talking about mobility impaired persons' access to our facilities. And one of the things that you did approve tonight with this swipe cards was the moving of the push buttons for the handicap accessible doors to be connected with the buzzer system. This will correct it because we'll have all those in compliance from the height-wise, etc. You'll see in page 12, you'll look at signage, particularly at the high school. When you look out in front of the high school, the handicap sign is not the appropriate height, so we've got to replace that signage. That's a corrective action. Accessible parking lots, and the example on this one is if you look at our main high school parking lot, there are 2 sections for handicap parking. One is designed for handicap parking for event parking, which is by the athletic field, and there's another set of handicap parking that is by the, if you will, the crosswalk that takes you to the front of the high school for the main entrance. If you're talking about the handicap parking by the athletic field, there's a crosswalk that's painted in the walkway that actually hits door 6 on the high school. There's no notification of where someone's supposed to go for it, so we need to put signage on there that says you need to go to the front of the building. Because the idea of any time you paint a crosswalk is that once they get to the other side, that is the entrance to the building, or there's information that tells them where to go for the entrance. So that's what 1.2. We've already corrected the one at the administration building where we've repainted the lines that used to be regular parking that we've converted to. There was no handicap parking spots outside of the administrative offices. So we've painted the lines. We have to get a new sign yet, and we've also made the crosswalk. You'll see some of the situations, like there's a change in grade, the cement, as you're entering I'm looking at 1.4 on page 13, that we're going to need to start addressing some of the cement. Maybe have to take out a piece, lower it, or raise and lower. The automatic doors, which I talked about, need to be on the same door that's buzzed open. For the locked or inaccessible entrances adjacent to parking lot, that happens to be door number 6 for 1.6. That's door number 6 at the high school. When you open an exterior door, the actual poundage has to be less than 8 pounds. And some of our doors measured over 12 pounds. So if you think about someone who is handicapped and they're pulling in a wheelchair, so a lot of that has to be retightening or adjusting the fixtures on the door, which can be easily fixed. Not necessarily. For instance, the door entering the high school counselor, they actually measured with I forgot the instrument they used, but they actually hook it up and pull. We can adjust the fittings on there to get it. The hot water drain pipes, sorry, I'll go back to the 1.9. Any racks we put in our lobby, they particularly looked at the high school. They have to be at a certain height. Our current high school racks are too high. We actually just had a new rack put up at the board office for some information, and we've now posted it that ADA compliant. And I know Ms. Michon is working on moving the high school ones to be compliant. When you go into the bathrooms, our common bathrooms, boys and girls, the insulation that is under the sink for a handicapped person needs to be insulated so that they aren't burned, if their wheels or their legs are against it. That's a relatively easy fix. Again, I talk about mirrors have to be, you have to have at least one that doesn't exceed 40 inches high, so someone in a wheelchair is able to look at themselves in the mirror in the restrooms. Soap dispensers, as you see, interior doors. Number 1.4 is going to be one that I'm going to need the entire organization to support us on. And if you think about it, is when you're walking in a classroom, there is if you take a yardstick is what they use as a measurement, you should be able to walk around between desks or in the doors and be able to walk around with that yardstick and not run into something. So our first instance is when you walk in the door, do we have bookcases and file cabinets right at the entranceway that prevent someone in a wheelchair from moving around in the building? There needs to be an access row, at least one, that allows someone in a wheelchair to move up and down. So looking at how our rooms are structured and layout, and that's going to be a call to arms for the whole organization, because some of our rooms, just the design of the buildings were years ago, and they're not meant to for the furniture. And there's the aisles. There's some things that haven't been removed, like for instance in the band room, the television is too low that if someone was walking through, they could hit their head. That will actually get removed when the new technology is finally finished installing. And you'll see some of the corrective actions on page 14 regarding different locations of our building. The only one, like I said, I would say 99% of these are easy corrections that we can make with little to minimal cost. The one that we're going to need to take a serious look at is that athletic high school varsity locker room and what our plans are going to entail. We have a couple options I see at this point. We could, if we want to keep it as an existing format, we need to upgrade the girls' locker room, which would be a cost, and I have no idea what that cost would be. Or we repurpose that, instead of it being an athletic varsity basketball locker room, I think you got the title right, we change it to be a, if you will, a co-ed sport locker room that multiple people can use from the perspective, and there's no cost, which would change if there was any, the challenge we're going to have, I think, if there's any specific boosters that donated money strictly for the sole purpose of that athletic program. You know, when you donate something to the school, it becomes property of the school, and the school district has to decide how it's using it. And that's why I think there was an issue with some band, I communicated in a newsletter that wanted to donate a trailer for the sole use of the band, and I strongly suggest we don't get into that practice, because this is what we could get into from a...
Couldn't it be used as a wrestling room? I mean, girls can wrestle.
It could be, if we want to opt to
But,
take
I mean,
off
it
the
doesn't
name
cost any
basketball.
And it costs nothing.
Correct. So those are the things that, my plan is to bring to you is here, because the board has to take action that we're going to do this, because we're committed to making this change by next December. So my plan is to bring you, here's the way we can be in compliance with as minimal cost in the district. And there's going to be some cost, like I'm going to have to buy new posts for the high school handicap test. I don't have an option on that. But as minimal cost, and that's a road that would be. So I would expect that to come to you at either December, if not the January board meeting. It has to be by January that you take action on it, so that we can send it to them by February. Otherwise, it was a very good day. I think they were really complimentary of the district and what we've done here and the staff. I want to give a shout out to Terry and Deb and Shirley and any of the other administrators, really, who that day, they stopped what they did and pulled together all the documentation, because as a new guy, I didn't know where some of this stuff existed. We went back into a lot of historical records to find, I mean, they wanted blueprints of our building when they were originally built, and construction blueprints from the last several years. So many days, Terry and Deb were on the floor crawling around the storage room finding those blueprints. So I do want to give a thanks and shout out to them, because they really cared me out. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
So Brian, what happens if we don't comply by a certain time?
If you don't comply, some of what they have the ability to do is withhold your federal funding, which includes Title I, IDEA, your lunch program, your special education, and it could be a serious impact financially to the district if we don't comply. And I don't want to be the one that says we're not compliant, but I don't want to lose that money. It's very valuable. But yeah, that they have the ability to withhold any federal funding.
Okay. All right. I need a motion to go into closed session for collective bargaining negotiations. Moved and supported. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed. Motion carries.